Erin,
Yes, Chairperson, morning.
how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay. Are we ready?
Recording in progress.
Yes, Chair, we are ready.
Good. Um, good morning, honorable members. Um, support
Morning,
staff,
Chair.
support staff, members of the public on the platform, media on the platform, and then let me take this opportunity to welcome the organizations who will be making presentations to the Standing Committee on Appropriations. As you know that today we're having hearings, public hearings on the Special Appropriation Bill 2021. You're all welcome. It has been a busy week with some of you will be seeing for the second time this week. You are most welcome, and we appreciate your inputs to the committee. Let's go to the agenda. The agenda. Are we having any apologies, Darren?
Chairperson, yes, we've got apologies from Ms. Peters, Mr. Mlenzana, and Ms. Ntlangwini.
Okay, let's note those apologies. Honorable members, will be having presentations from the UJ College of Business and Economics. UJ College of Business and Economics. I think it's the first time they are coming to the committee. You are most welcome. We'll also be having a presentation from Organization and Doing Tax Abuse, and also we'll be having a presentation from COSATU. We'll coming in that order, and we'll be starting with the UJ College of Business and Economics, as I've said. We are allocating 20 minutes max for your presentation, and then after we finished UJ, then we'll allow Outer to come in, and then we'll allow COSATU to come in. And then after that, the honorable members will interact with your presentations. Okay, can you start? And please, UJ College of Business and Economics, introduce yourselves. If there's a delegation that you are leading, let's have that. Thank you very much. You're all welcome. UJ.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you on this very important matter. Can I share my presentation, or can I first introduce myself? My name is Joachim Vermooten. I'm a research associate at the university, Department of Transport and Logistics Management and Economics. And I'm here today to make a presentation to illustrate the written submissions made by Professor Pisa, Professor Walters, and myself. Can I start the presentation?
Please do, and also just time yourself. I don't want to interfere with your presentations.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, the concerns that we have is twofold. The one relates...
Promote me. We are not seeing your presentation.
Let me just have a look what's going on. Ah, magic.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
My apologies. slide to run.
Thank you.
Okay, we have two types of concerns. The first relate to economic and air transport policy principles. That, of course, affects Mango rather than the other subsidiaries. And then secondly, financial risks and implications of this appropriation. We have focused on Mango, but the second concerns also relate to the issue of the other subsidiaries. In a nutshell, state aid to Mango is not acceptable. It distorts the market, whilst other airlines in the private sector have to deal with COVID on their own. And though explicit state aid is given to them, but therefore it's of a discriminatory nature. It's also contrary to the principles of the competitive air transport market and air transport policies. At the moment, Mango is busy competing with very, very low fares against private sector airlines based on the expectations of this appropriation of financial aid. The appropriation will also cause an economic overlap with SAA, and competition between SAA and Mango on the same route will exacerbate the funds that are needed for the future. So it's really the start of another unending era of funding for Mango, unfortunately. This presentation will then deal with the economic and air transport policy principles and then raise specific issues to assist the committee to consider and deliberate the appropriations. So the major issues is there was a policy choice made some time ago on the South African air transport market, that of a competitive market instead of a state-subsidized monopoly. That is very important, and in this respect, the airlines, or state-owned airlines, differ from all other SOEs, as they operate in monopoly situations, whilst the airlines operate in competition to other airlines. So state aid granted to any state-owned airline actually hurts the other competitors, and it hurts the consumers, and I'll explain that a little later. The second is the issue of conflict of interest. The grant of discriminatory state financial aid to a state-owned airline competes with the government's role of enabler and a regulator of the aviation sector. Then the grant of the state financial aid to Mango is contrary to government policy and assurances relating to the equal treatment of airlines, the role of government and state-owned airlines, and the interest of users. The negative impact distorts the free working of competitive forces, which drive the private sector competitors from the market and therefore reduces the competition and other negative consequences on consumer welfare. Then there are specific issues on Mango and SAA's business rescue plan, and I'll just show the highlights of that first. The highlights of the proposed 2.7 billion discriminatory appropriation is that Mango simply ran out of money with no accountability. No motivation has been provided for government to invest in Mango and other SAA subsidiaries. So the question is, what is the need to be addressed? Why is the government funds required to operate a low-cost airline in the domestic market? There are other airlines operating already with reasonable competition between them. What will change if the market, if the money is provided to Mango? There is no explicit mandate. So, for example, there is no Mango Act or SAA Technical Act. There are no financial statements. There are no budgets viability studies or projections that supports the funding. It really relates to past losses. And Mango and SAA will compete on the same route, and a price war between two state-owned airlines has no ending in the amount of funding that it would require. Okay, state aid in the nature contemplated by Mango is discriminatory, is structurally unfair, and it hurts competitors, and is not in the best interest of the economy and consumers. If we talk about the competitive market, we all know the advantages of being able to shop around for the best deal. That's on quality and on price. Now, the question is, what is state financial aid? So the answer is really, it is anything that's not based on normal investors' principles. In a normal investor principle, you would have a budget or a projection, and you would entice investors to invest in your project, and they hope to earn a reasonable return on investment. The situation with the airlines are different. They just carry on and then expect guarantees to borrow more money, and then eventually government to fill in the pockets of the debtors or the creditors of debt. So that is definitely not a similar situation. And it's discriminatory as it's not applicable to airlines or competitors in that. Okay, some highlights on the domestic aviation policy. You'll see the words level playing fields and the promotion of competition to ensure level playing fields. And then there's the duty to treat everybody, all the participants in the market equally before the law. That means that the same rules relating to entry, capacity, airfares, its operations and exit from the market needs to be similar. And then users' interest and views should explicitly be taken in account. So this is to demonstrate why we need a level playing field. You can clearly see in this example that there are teams competing, and one is clearly biased, and we say that that's being pumped up by state aid. So that's the type of advantage that is conferred by state aid, and it's not a level playing field. Why is a level playing field necessary? I've put down some OECD findings for you. Ultimately, it puts the government in a precarious position that it is the enabler of the market, the Department of Transport, but through the ownership. If the ownership becomes too important, then it actually negates the whole issue of being enabler and regulator of the market. And what has happened to date? So since SAA was put into government, or government became direct controller of it, there were cash transfers of 57 billion. There's additional guarantees of 19.1 billion. So that's 76 billion, together with the 14 provided by Transnet. That's already 90.8 billion lost. There are no bridges built. There are no schools left behind. There are no toilets built. Many facilities that are needed elsewhere has gone down the drains, so to speak. And that's how it looks. You know, we see this big hole in the government's purse developing. And if the two state-owned airlines compete to each other, that hole will actually increase. Now, the impact of state aid, the first one is that it enables a larger share of the market than such an airline would have had in the absence of state aid, even if it's less efficient. It doesn't have to compete on merit. It has strong incentives to improve, or doesn't have strong incentives to improve its efficiencies. As we've seen, despite something like 11 to 14 turnaround plans, the net losses has remained the same for SAA, between 5.5 to 6 billion per annum. it would be less inclined to adopt difficult measures to actually restructure. And it always has the ability to rely on the government to bail it out if things go wrong. And we've seen repeated cycles of that. In a declining market, which we have, state aid could drive much more efficient operators from the market, and eventually you might end up with a state-subsidized monopoly. So subsidies of this nature distort price signals, and it deviates from real cost-based pricing. The conflict of interest between government's role as regulator of the United DOT and the owner of SAA DPE. SAA became financially distressed, and the government's interest in the survival of the state-owned airline and also Mango appears to have become more important than the maintenance of a competitive market, which is our big concern. And discriminatory financial state aid distorts market forces and the competitive dynamics in the market. For the consumers, they've lost out on market growth and competition between efficient airlines, and we lag basically to all African airlines growth and of course international airline growth. So that's the result of excessive state aid to one party. Now, the impact of the appropriation on SAA's business plan is the first topic. Taking away 2.7 billion from SAA's creditors according to its business plan, business restructuring plan, favor the subsidiaries. It implies that such amount would have to be provided to those affected creditors somewhere in the future. So it's not suddenly gone. It is still a liability that has to be settled in future. So that implies that further appropriations will have to be made to SAA. SAA's ordinary concurrent creditors will lose out. And I'm focusing here on the public. That's the prepaid tickets and the frequent flyer credit liabilities, some of which significant amounts are just postponed to the future. Mango's creditors will be paid whilst SAA's creditors would not be paid. That is a weird implication, which I don't think is really the intention. Okay, it implies that further money has to be earmarked for a later stage for SAA creditors, which I've said. And it's not clear if the creditors affected have actually agreed to that and where it places the legality of the whole business rescue plan, whether it's really in law implemented. Okay, when and how such underfunded creditors will be paid, and on what terms such concurrent creditors will be able to provide additional credit to SAA to restart. Those are factors that affect decisions for the future. On Mango specifically, some of these we've already mentioned in the summary in front. The first is the committee needs to establish what is the purpose of the 918 million and probably more that is required by Mango. Who would be paid? No rationale for funding of Mango has been made. And on what basis should Parliament add money to Mango? There's no Mango Act that I said. There's no obligation to establish or maintain it. Mango was a private venture of SAA. It didn't come to government to actually ask money for it. No business plan was presented to government. So, was any commitment or recourse to government promised to any of the creditors of Mango? No government guarantees, as far as we know, have been provided to Mango. So why should government pay Mango's creditors whilst they provide excessive or reckless credit to Mango? On what basis should the money now be provided to fund all the creditors of Mango so they get 100% of their debt that's due to them, whilst the same type of creditors only get 7.5 cents in the rand for debt extended to SAA. That doesn't seem to make sense. Where are the scheduled services lacking that would require state intervention? There's no strategic value in the major domestic markets where Mango operates. So, you know, we failed to see what is to be achieved by this. Government is also not empowered just to dish out money for any purpose. As you are aware, the PFMA has many prescripts relating to investments and new ventures and that type of stuff. And ultimately, this appropriation will represent the key to further funding. It's only unlocking further amounts that will be required in the future. Those haven't been forecasted and projected at this time. Okay, as I said, there's no legal obligation to provide the funding for Mango. And if there is, it should require a proper motivation, including the counterfactual not providing money for Mango. Mango's current status should clearly be disclosed, and a realistic projection of its future funding and the requirements should be provided. What will be achieved? What value would be obtained for the taxpayer? Is that value for money, for example? Our view is that the domestic market is currently overtraded with too much capacity for the low level of demand. And we fail to see why it's necessary for government to incur major costs and losses just to provide additional capacity when there's in reality no need for it at this time. Both Mango and SAA contemplates competition on the same route, which I raised a little bit earlier, and the financial state backing of a price war between these two state-owned airlines would amount, in my view, to fruitless and wasteful expenditure. What are the realistic projections of these operations for the next 3 to 5 years? What is to be expected will be the amount to be appropriated on private sector airlines. Up to date, there is no indication that any money would be provided to private sector airlines, as many other countries have done. Those countries believe in the concept of maintaining competition and do not prefer state-owned airlines to private sector airlines. It's also in line with the equal treatment principle that we have in our aviation policies. Then the other question is, can Mango actually do a better job than the existing operators, and why? Why does the state not provide funding to its competitors? Up to what level will Mango be allowed to continue to lose money? It has not announced any restructuring plan. What are the steps to restructure Mango and turn it around? Or will it just continue making losses? And if there's a turnaround plan, it should be disclosed and the cost of it as well. What amount of funding does Mango require in the next 3 to 5 years at the current demand levels? Why would Mango's future losses have to be funded by the state? It's not only the position that they're in at the moment, but going forward. Why does the state need to hold on to Mango? Can Mango be closed? Can Mango be sold? And why not? The last item, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of public interest. And that relates basically to licenses and route rights of the state-owned airlines. And the fact that these airlines are being allowed to continue to operate, nonetheless that they cannot demonstrate their fitness and properness as with regard to, on the one hand, safety and the other on financial matters. That's not in the public's interest, and I already raised the issue that some of these prepayments have to wait now for payment. And it's contrary to the equal treatment principle, and it exposes the public to the insolvency risk of state-owned airlines, which is also contrary to the principle of that the user's interests need to be taken into account. Mr. Chairman, I thank you and the committee for listening to us, and I hope that these issues will be further considered by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for the presentation. Can you have Outer? You are well within your time, Doc.
Thank you.
I just want to start by saying thank you so much for this opportunity to present to this honourable committee. Thank you, Chair. And if I may, I would then proceed. Thank you so much.
Please do thank you. Welcome, Advocate Vic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse would like to make a few submissions in respect of this special appropriations bill. And as the committee and Chair, you would have noticed, is that it is, submissions in relation to Section 3, as read with vote 10 of the schedule. Just a little bit about ALTA. ALTA is a South African non-profit civil organization. We have no links to political parties. We received no foreign funding. We are purely and proudly crowdfunded by the people of South Africa. Now, there is our mission. I think what I would like to reiterate is that we realize that corruption is a scourge. And I think we will find commonality with this committee in the sense that we all want to eradicate corruption. We are passionate about eradicating corruption, and it's about removing the corrupt individual so that we can work on a better South Africa for all. But let's get back to, again, the submission and just really being honored to be here today. I hope this committee will understand that ALTA's interest in this appropriation bill stems from its primary objective to act in the public interest. We are worried about scarce resources, and we are worried that scarce resources that were previously approved and committed for a particular purpose by the government are not reallocated for another purpose without following due process. May I just stop here for a minute to say that this is not about a policy about bailing out Mango. This is not what we are saying. The decision to bail out or give money to Mango is a separate issue. What we are dealing with here is how this appropriation bill deals with money that was allocated to SAA and that it's now being reallocated to Mango. It's about the legal process that we feel it there is no legal resource. So to continue is that hopefully this committee will understand that its interest is also in the proper management of major state-owned entities. That ALTA, representing the taxpayers who put the bill of state-owned entities through paying their taxes, have a direct interest in how state-owned entities are run. Now, notwithstanding our position that, and I think that is well known, that we feel that a failed SOE like SAA should not be receiving ongoing bailouts, that has now happened. So the purpose of our submission is therefore on the special appropriation bill is to assure that because there is this process now, SAA was bailed out, that the approved business rescue plan is implemented in accordance with its terms, which were approved by the creditors of SAA on or about the 14th of July 2020. Now, ALTA submits, and let me start off by saying this, that the business rescue plan does not authorize the diversion of the 2.7 billion, and that Section 3 is not consistent with the Constitution, the Companies Act, the PFMA, and the Business Rescue Plan. And therefore, we are of the opinion that that is therefore against public policy. So let's start with, so why are we saying this? So let's look at the business rescue of SAA. Now, on the 5th of December 2019, and I don't want to go into too much detail, I think that has been part has been out there and in the public discourse, and I'm definitely not going to preach to this committee who knows their stuff. But SAA was financially distressed, and they then announced, or the board of directors announced, that SAA voluntarily will commence business rescue proceedings. Now, we applaud the board of directors because they were duty bound to do this. So the joint business practitioners were appointed, who then published a business rescue plan on the 16th of June 2020, which carefully sets out how SAA will be rescued in a manner that maximizes the likelihood of SAA continuing in existence on a solvent basis. So it may be important to reiterate, why does a company go into business rescue? It's in order to save that company, and a business rescue plan is therefore published in order to show exactly that. How are we going to save SAA? So following consultations between the practitioners and all the affected persons, because one must also remember, although the public has got an interest and the board of directors has got an interest, there are also creditors, there's also employees, and all of these affected persons need to be consulted, and they need to adopt a business rescue plan. So on the 14th of July, this business rescue plan was adopted. On the 23rd of July, the practitioners then published the SA Business Rescue Condition Fulfillment Report. And that just confirmed that government then had provided a letter of support, and that government confirmed its commitment to fund the costs, the restructuring costs, which basically included, and I'm not going to allude to all of them, but, retrenchment costs, SAA lenders costs, unflown ticket liabilities, creditors, and so forth. But what is most important is that government approved supporting SAA during the post-ramp-up period until SAA is profitable and self-sustaining, because that was the purpose. That was the purpose of the business rescue plan, to make sure that, SAA will fly again and make South Africa proud. Now, government allocated an amount of 10.5 billion to implement the business rescue plan. So then SAA exited on the 30th of April 2021. Now, according to National Treasury, we all know 7.8 billion of the 10.5 was allocated and transferred to SAA. There was then this balance of 2.7 billion. And this is the contentious issue. This is then the amount of money that the Special Appropriation Bill now seeks to reallocate to SAA's subsidiaries. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is not about, the question, do we think that they need the 2.7 billion or not? Should they get it? Should they not get it? No, it's not about that. That we believe is a totally separate issue. What we are saying is that the business rescue plan, which comprehensively lists the restructuring costs, does not contemplate that any portion of the 10.5 billion rand must be transferred to subsidiaries. The business rescue plan only makes reference to the subsidiaries in one relevant issue, and I'm going to read that piece. The capitalization of SAA Technical Air Chefs and Mango through subscription by the company of ordinary shares in these entities to ensure financial stability. So the implementation of the business rescue plan. So it reiterates and it highlights the fact that the implementation of the business rescue plan is important. Thereafter, one should look at the financial position of the subsidiaries, that this 10.5 billion is for the business rescue plan of SAA and not its subsidiaries. Now, we found a few contradictory statements from government, in the sense that it's quite clear that they want to use the 2.7 billion for the subsidiaries, but whether it should go directly to the subsidiaries through SAA and all of that. But there are no public documents that reflect this approval of the use of 2.7 billion for the subsidiaries. And that we must keep in mind. And therefore, it's our submission that there is no legal basis for the reallocation of the funds as proposed in this bill, specifically Section 3 of the Special Appropriations Bill. Now, there are various reasons, but the main reason is the following. This government failed to comply with its commitment to allocate the entire 10.5 billion towards the reconstruction costs of SAA. It would result in the business rescue plan not fully being implemented in accordance with its terms, which would prejudice the successful restructure of SAA and the position of affected persons who approved the business rescue plan. Please, I want the committee to really carefully think about that. If we take away 2.7 billion of the 10.5 billion rand, there is money missing for restructuring SAA to get SAA where it should be. But also, there are affected persons who said yes to a business rescue plan that did not include part of this money going to subsidiaries. The business rescue plan does not sanction the retribution of funds earmarked for SAA to subsidiaries. Because think about it, otherwise there would have been no need to find a mechanism for the transfers of the funds. Because why are we even considering a special appropriations bill if the transfer of the funds were part of the business rescue plan? So we have to accept that because we are discussing the appropriations bill, that it is not in the business rescue plan. Because, as I said, otherwise there's no need to look for a vehicle. Now, the special appropriations bill purports to rechannel funds earmarked for SAA directly to the subsidiaries or via SAA without following due process. And it is in contravention of the Companies Act, which I will deal with now. Now, so please consider the following. If the subsidiaries are in financial distress, shouldn't they be in business rescue? Shouldn't we go through the process the same as with SAA and without considering whether we agree with bailouts for the subsidiary, but then you can independently consider the financial position of Mango, SAA Technical and Airships. If they are not financially distressed, it becomes difficult to see why they need government funding. I have pointed and congratulated the board of SAA for announcing that or voted that they were going into business rescue. If the subsidiaries are in financial distress, there's a similar duty on their board to do exactly the same. So, what the position is exactly is actually unknown. We can debate that. But what stands above water is that this appropriations bill cannot divert money from the business rescue plan to the subsidiaries. But why do we say that this is in contravention of the Companies Act? Because the Companies Act states clearly the legal nature of a business rescue plan. In Section 152 says that, and I quote, a business rescue plan that has been adopted is binding on the company and on each of its creditors. I've been thinking about this and what is a good example. So if one goes out of business rescue, and it happened in SAA as well, the creditors, for example, accept 1 cent in a rand, and when the plan is accepted, they can't thereafter now sue the state. But if the state does not bind itself to this business rescue plan, use the appropriation bill to take some of that money for the subsidiaries. My question is, why then can't the creditors now can come back and say, but okay, Wokai, we now want to sue SAA for the full amount because, you know, they are not abiding by the business rescue. And I think the committee can appreciate that that's just chaos. That will just be chaos. And that is not the purpose of this whole process. It's also not the purpose of the Companies Act. So accordingly, the business rescue plan became binding on SAA and on government upon its adoption. Now, the Special Appropriation Bill, in seeking to divert funds from SAA to its subsidiaries, will subvert this requirement. And I would just like to reiterate, and I forgot totally about my lovely presentation, I do apologize, refer this committee to Boysens versus Jonkheer, Boere Wynmakerij, and another, where the court stated specifically, in the circumstances, the whole scheme of these provisions is such that there is, to my mind, no room for a business rescue practitioner to reserve to himself the right to amend the business rescue plan. By doing so, he would effectively circumvent the procedure as set out in the Act. Any other interpretation would make nonsense of the process provided for in the Act, whereby control over the business rescue proceedings is to be exercised by democratic majority vote of the creditors and affected parties. So one can see that it is important that the democratic vote of the creditors and affected parties is very important. And by going against that is definitely not in the best interest. So Apple admits that if the bill is assented to, the effect thereof would be akin to subverting the business rescue plan, as in the Boysens case, by providing government with a mechanism to amend the business rescue plan after its adoption, which will prejudice all SAA's affected persons and cannot be what the authority intended upon proclamation of the Companies Act. Now, this point, interestingly enough, was picked up, and we make reference to that in our submission, of the chairperson of the SAA Business Rescue Update meeting with the Minister and Deputy Minister on the 25th of March. During the discussions in these meetings, the chairperson specifically asked why, if 2.7 billion had been allocated to the subsidiaries in the business rescue plan, why it's now necessary to seek a special appropriation? Indeed, this is the question that needs to be answered by government. The fact is that the full 10.5 billion was approved by government for SAA, not its subsidiaries. Now, I want you to also just be aware of, the Companies Act deal with the fact that if provisions of the Companies Act is against an act of parliament, how that should be dealt with. It's our submission that because the Special Appropriations Bill is not made provision for, the provisions of the Companies Act will prevail. So the business rescue plan under this section of the Companies Act and the Special Appropriation Bill cannot be applied concurrently. So should the Appropriation Bill be passed, it will be contrary to the Companies Act. It will unduly prejudice the interest of SAA, SAA's affected person, including creditors, the general public. And this will also, may I just reiterate, there will be legal uncertainty regarding the legitimacy of business rescue proceedings under the Companies Act. And this will ultimately put the entire business rescue of SAA at risk. Now, we are saying that there's no limit as to the number of adjustment budgets that can be done. So this whole appropriation bill is nothing untoward. However, there is a limit as to when and under what conditions the minister may introduce an adjustment budget. And we are saying that the Special Appropriation Bill is for all intents and purposes an adjustment appropriation bill. So it can only be introduced in one of 7 circumstances. And we believe that Section 3, specifically 1 and 2, makes reference to some of this criteria in the PFMA, but not Section 3. And therefore, the Special Appropriations Bill is vague, overbroad, and if passed in its current form, would be susceptible to judicial review. And I'm very quickly running out of time. So concluding, and in summary, the solutions. We are saying that Section 3 of the Special Appropriation Bill should be removed to enable successful implementation of the Business Rescue Plan. The Minister of Finance and Minister of Public Enterprises must then determine the need for funding for the subsidiaries and the extent to which they should be liquidated. This process must be open to the public and transparent. I do thank you, and hopefully the committee, if I've missed something, will please read the submission, because we do feel passionate about it. And please, again, I want to reiterate, it's not about the policy. Does Mango need help? Most probably, but not through the Special Appropriation Bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Advocate Fick. I think it's the first time you appeared before the committee. So
thank you so much. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
Really a privilege.
Yes. Can we go to COSATU? Is COSATU in?
Chairperson, yes. Matthew Parks is on the platform. Okay.
Oh,
no, I'm here, Comrade Chair. Just grabbing our presentation.
Comrade Mate, I thought you have gone all.
No, I can't do that because there's a former COSATU Free State Provincial Chairperson here, and he will report me to the CEC of COSATU for immediate redeployment to Pongola as a shop steward for SAMU or something.
Please go.
So, no, thanks. Good morning, Comrade Chair, honorable members and colleagues. Thank you for giving us as COSATU our chance to raise our views on this Special Appropriations Bill, and I think we do appreciate it. I want to say, Comrade Chair, that so we'll speak to all 3 parts of the bill, not just with the SAA part. I think we want to say at the outset, we welcome the Special Appropriations Bill, and we do support its passage by Parliament. We believe that the supplementary appropriations for vaccines to fight COVID-19, the extending the 350 Rand COVID-19 grant until April, and also the allowing the sharing of funding allocated to SAA within SAA subsidiaries, we believe that all of them are critical and they're all rational and needed. We do have 2 proposed amendments to it, Comrade Chair, based upon Parliament's powers to amend budget appropriations legislation. One is to amend the bill to extend the 350 COVID-19 grant until the end of the financial year, that's March 2022. And we also want to raise the issue of the 300 million cuts to the CCMA, and also to call upon the committee to also amend the bill to reverse those cuts because they threaten to collapse the CCMA. Chair, in terms of the issues around the SAA group, we do support additional funding and support given to the SAA group. And we take the group as a holistic combined company. But SAA until recent times, Comrade Chair, until about a decade ago, we were very proud that it was always continuously rated as one of the best airlines in the world, in Africa, the region, and so forth. We believe it still has a role to play. We believe it is uniquely placed to link our 9 provinces to each other.
Recording stopped.
We also believe...
Recording in progress.
We also believe, Comrade Chair, that SAA group can play a critical role linking South Africa to the rest of the continent and indeed to the world. Chair, our interest as COSATU is that true tourism, of which SAA is a critical element, a support tool, is one of the 3 largest employment sectors in the economy. It has more than a million workers inclusive dependent upon it. And of course, I think Comrade Chair must also be cognizant that during this pandemic, tourism, unlike almost any other industry, has been heavily hit. It will take some time to recover. It needs that additional support, but also equally, it is a huge potential growth industry, but it's going to need some time to transform and to grow. Chair, I mean, for us, and I think maybe it's also important to know that people often love to demonize SCA, and they have every right to be critical of its failings, of its mismanagement, of its corruption, etc. But it's also important to remember, Honorable Chair, that the SAA group of SAA, Air Chefs, Technical, Voyager, plus also SA Express, combined, you're talking about 11,500 workers, people with families, people who have been largely left unpaid since March last year. Many of them have lost their homes and their possessions. So when we talk about it, we must also look at the humane perspective of what can we do to assist these workers. So I think on that basis, we do support any relief being given to these workers, so many of them of whom are our members, but also members of other trade unions. And these are also strategic national assets, which have got huge potential. SA Technical has played a critical role in servicing international airlines coming to us. Similarly for Air Chefs, etc., they've got huge potential. Chair, but I think we are concerned, we do share the concerns of colleagues that the turnaround plan, the short, the medium, the long-term interventions for SAA Group are very ambiguous. We think much more detail needs to be given by government about what are the routes it must have, which planes are needed, what are the staffing complements that will be needed, what equity partners will be included at which levels, equally, what is the plan to pay off the debt. But also, Comrade Chair, I think we need to have government needs to have a much better jobs plan for those staff. If some staff are going to be let go, which is happening, can we have a jobs plan for them besides simply sending them to the unemployment queue, sending them off to the UIF? These are people with skills, and we should be able to find a plan to absorb them elsewhere. So, Chair, a proposal on the SAA issue is simply for government to urgently table at Parliament a clear plan that will ensure the revival, but also most critically, the sustainability of the SAA group, and a jobs plan for those staff who can be absorbed and those staff who won't be absorbed. Chair, on the 350 Rand COVID-19 grant, I think we want to welcome the additional extension of 1 month for it. I think Comrade Chair would want to say that, look, the COVID-19 grant has had many challenges, many weaknesses. I think to say that its distribution has been chaotic would be a fair description. But I think also, to be fair to government, it is a huge task to undertake in a very short space of time, under very trying conditions. But Chair, if you look at the queues of the post office, where every day you see people queuing from 6, 7 in the morning in the hundreds, it shows you that this is a welcome and a badly needed source of relief for millions of the most destitute during this pandemic. Equally, Comrade Chair, these are people who won't find jobs tomorrow, especially in an economy of 40% unemployment. But these are the long-term unemployed. And it's something, as small as it is something for them to buy bread for the families. So we are quite concerned and disappointed, Honourable Chair, that government has not conceded to extending it beyond April this year. We understand the Department of Social Development has tabled a proposal to Cabinet to extend it to the end of this budget year, in other words, March next year. We think government needs to do that. And Chair, we think simply, when you have an economy of 40% unemployment, when it takes a worker who loses their job about 2 years to find another job, it's inhumane to stop the sole source of food for millions. Its extension at 2 billion Rand a month, Comrade Chair, we think is affordable, not to make light of such amounts, but in a broader scheme of a budget of almost 1.7 trillion, it's manageable. We think equally, Comrade Chair, to make the point, it's far less than government loses to corruption, wasteful expenditure. It's far less than what government has to spend on lawsuits for state incompetence in hospitals, police, etc. Chair, I think most political parties, if I'm correct, support some sort of a universal or basic income grant. I don't think there's any fundamental ideological difference amongst us anymore on that issue. And in essence, this 350 is a basic income grant with all of its issues. The time when you need such a grant is when the economy is at its lowest, like right now when the economy is in its greatest recession in 100 years. You don't need it when times are better. when you hope people have got jobs and they don't depend upon the state for assistance. So Chair, we think it needs to be one extended for the duration of this financial year at a minimum, and ideally, in fact, beyond that. But let's just do this year and say, can it not be extended? So our proposal, honourable members, is that Parliament should amend the bill to remove the April 2021 cutoff date until the end of this financial year. Chair, on the COVID-19 vaccines, I think we must welcome the additional funding for it. I think we must appreciate the work done by the Department of Health to get an agreement with the medical aids to cover the cost of the vaccines for their almost 9 million members, but also to convince them to have covered the cost of an additional 9 million persons, because government alone cannot sustain this level of costs. Equally, Comrade Chair, I think I want to make the point, and it may sound obvious, but the economy can't afford to sustain these levels of restrictions and periodic lockdowns. So for us, the success of the vaccine program is critical, but we want to see it being rolled out much faster so that we can achieve the 67% plus population immunity level, which is critical to saving lives and to saving jobs. But Chair, our concern is COSATU, and we felt we had to raise this issue with your honourable members now, is that the pace at which the vaccines have been rolled out has been inexcusably slow. We are 6 months down the road. Barely 1% of the population has received the vaccines. We cannot blame wealthy countries in the West for having beaten us to the queue. We can't plead poverty. This is simply about management and about getting one's ducks in a row and doing the hard work last year, not now. Right now, Chair, in SADC, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, Swaziland, Eswatini are all ahead of us in the vaccine rollout program. Chair, in Africa, we are number 26 in the vaccine rollout program. And to show you the absurdity of what we have managed to not do, that Somalia, a country which has not had a functioning national government since 1993, has vaccinated more people than us. Yet we are the leading industrial manufacturing country in Africa. We, in fact, produce the vaccines locally. We cannot explain this level of mediocrity in government, to be honest, Comrade Chair. Chair, I think also want to say that, to make the point, that the longer we take the roll of the vaccines, the longer it'll take to reopen the economy. And to be honest, the more people who will die unnecessarily. 95% of the world's countries have imposed very stringent travel restrictions upon South Africa. This is going to further decimate our very fragile, in parts collapsing tourism industry, and equally is going to undermine our capacity to trade with the world. So we know this is slightly outside of the purview of the Appropriations Committee, Chair, but we felt nonetheless it's important to raise with Parliament. Government needs to open all the vaccine sites by the end of this month and to ensure that we ramp up the daily vaccination rates from 20,000 a day to 200,000 a day. Otherwise, we won't achieve that 67% target by December. Chair, the last thing we wanted to raise, and was based upon our understanding that Parliament has got the power to amend budgets, is that we must raise the issue of the CCMA. Government had slashed from the medium-term expenditure framework 600 million rand from the CCMA. This is a very small drop in the ocean of the budget, but is literally bringing the CCMA to its very knees, honourable members. It has forced the CCMA to reduce its commissioners by 40%. It has forced it to, in some instances, to close doors and to cancel conciliation services, which is legally required to provide. And this has a huge impact. Chair, and we must give the context that in fact, this is a very painful blow and a slap in the face to thousands of workers who literally depend upon the CCMA to help save their wages, the pensions, the jobs, or even the lives. We have seen, Comrade Chair, these numbers have increased as the economy was shut down and we were plunged into a recession. 2.2 million workers lost their jobs last year. Millions lost wages. Many were forced to work in very dangerous conditions in the pandemic. They needed the CCMA to be there. What we've had is the decapacitation of the CCMA. We've seen increasingly workers and even opportunist organizations seeking to take political advantage, protesting at the CCMA's offices, making the situation even worse. So instead of us having increased the funding to CCMA to help it with this increased demand for services, Treasury has actually slashed it, Honourable Chair. We have submitted a memorandum on this to Cabinet. We've raised this with the President, with the Ministers of Labour and Employment, with the Minister of Treasury, Finance. The other federations have supported our memorandum. Organized businesses also submitted such a memorandum to Cabinet. Yet we've had no response from Cabinet or from Treasury, though the President did commit in his May Day speech to try to intervene on this issue, and it will be on the Lions Political Council agenda for next week. So, Chair, I propose on this regard, as I get to the end, is that we're calling upon Parliament to reject the budget cuts to the CCMA and simply to reinstate the reduced expenditure to the CCMA, or the originally envisaged expenditure allocation to the CCMA, to reinstate that in the Special Appropriations Bill. The second one is for Treasury to engage with the Departments of Employment and Labour and Higher Education and Training, with COSATU, with other federations, with organised business, on additional sources of funding for the CCMA, having an appreciation for the serious financial pressures that all departments are facing. And we think one instance here, Chair, where could we get funding for CCMA is simply from the SETAs. We often find there's a significant amount of under expenditure in the SETAs, and they should come to the party to assist. So in conclusion, Honourable Chair members, I think we want to welcome this Special Appropriations Bill. We want to support its passage by Parliament, but we do want to say that government needs to table a serious turnaround plan for the SAA group, including a jobs plan for its workers. Government needs to accelerate the rolling out of the vaccine program. And lastly, Chair, two proposed amendments for the extension of the COVID-19 350 grant until the end of this financial year, and for us to reverse the budgetary cuts to the CCMA in this bill. But let me stop there, Comrade Chair, and thank members for giving us space, and hopefully we've not exceeded that time frame. Thank you, Comrade Chair and members.
Thank you so much. That was, and I must say, you were all within your times. You'll give us enough time to engage with the with the presentations. Can I check with the honourable members who would like to have a bite? Honourable members.
Matafa.
Honourable Matafa.
Sonyana.
Honourable Sonyana.
Kaiso.
Honourable Kaiso. Any other honourable member who would like to come in?
Dipuo Peters.
Honourable Peters. Any other honourable member? Thank you very much, honourable members. I will start with Honourable Matafa.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Good morning, honourable members and our guests. Chair, I am going to be very brief, but let me start firstly by thanking the presenters for the work they've put into their presentations and the insight that they bring to the discussion. Chair, I only have two issues. The first one is maybe a question for Dr. Vermooten. Before I raise a question, let me make a statement. And the statement is that I feel that mango is necessary to be in the skies for a simple reason that it targets low-cost market, which in my view has only a very limited number of players. Yes, I agree and hear what Dr. Vermooten is stating, that there might be a price war between Mango and SAA, who in some instances also travel similar routes. So that contradiction, it's something that maybe does require entertainment in saying, maybe is it time that maybe we review the Mango routes or not? But my view is that without Mango, it is then when the market will be monopolized. I'm speaking under correction. My research shows me that we only have 3 low-cost airlines. And if Mango falls off, you'll only have 2. And I think that is when we are going to experience the high risk of the market being monopolized by these 2 that will be remaining. So I think that it is necessary that Mango remains to bring the necessary competition and choice for travelers in that particular market segment. Now, I want to suggest that the questions as raised by Dr. Vermoeden in slide 16 become ever important considering the point that I just have made above. Then the question then is, would maybe a review of Mango's operations assist to maybe make it profitable? Because you are right, Dr. Vermoeten, through you, Chair. The lack of information from Mango in terms of their financial standing, how much they owe, to who do they owe this particular monies, it's something that really needs to be looked at, because knowledge of that information will assist to indicate if whether those that we owe are we owing them justifiably so. And in that, Chair, I mean, we can at least have a sense, if we do not have aircraft that we own as Mango, are we then paying competitive or market-related lease prices for this aircraft that we use as compared to these other competitors that I'm speaking about? So my question would be, would it not be fair for Mango to have a situation where a market analysis is done in comparison with how other competitors are performing in the market, and see if whether a change in its operation can maybe assist, particularly as it speaks to issues of its financial viability? The second point, Chair, is just to concur with Advocate Fick and Comrade Parks on the need to arrest fiscal leakages, as well as the intensification of the fight against corruption. But maybe the question there would be, one of the interventions that government has brought in, or Parliament, was to amend the Auditor General Act to expand its mandate and ensure that there is some teeth for the AG where there is maladministration detected and proven, to ensure that this is prevented or some of these funds are recouped. Now, the question would be, what else can be done? And I'm speaking this, Chair, with the backdrop of all these commissions and the support that government is giving to them to ensure that corruption is uprooted. Is there maybe a blind spot that as legislators we did not see that requires our attention, so that we then intensify the fight against corruption and leakages that we experience through irregular expenditure and wasteful expenses? I will pause there, Chair, but again, thank you very much for the presenters. We really appreciate the insight, and we'll definitely take this into our discussions going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Hlanyana, please come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, we welcome the presentation from all the three presenters today. They were eye-opening. They say we learn every day as members of Parliament. So I will engage with each separately. So firstly, with Dr. Vermoeden. Dr. Vermoeden, thank you very much for your presentation. I just have 4 issues that I would like to raise with you. And also maybe you can also give us clarities on some of the issues that you have raised. First and foremost, Doctor, you know, Mango is a proudly South African. You know, it is our baby as the nation. And then you don't think that by ending funding to Mango, are we not going to be shooting ourselves in the foot by closing down the only low-cost airline which belongs to the people of South Africa? But again, I feel personally that Mango needs to change the way it does business. There are a lot of areas which I believe Mango should be going to, but Mango does not go. leaving other airlines like Airlink to literally enjoy some of the spaces where no one else goes to in the Republic of South Africa. So yes, the business plan of Mango must change, and it must also go to other areas of the country where Airlink is. Maybe they can be competitors to Airlink instead of just being competitors to SAA, Kulula, and Flyfair. On the issue of policy, Doctor, you touched on the policy choice. It was quite interesting, and it's a shame that you did not go quite deep into it, because you were speaking about the state subside. What?
Subsidy?
Yes, subsidy monopoly. So I wanted you to maybe further engage with us on that one, on the policy choices, because you gave us two. Why do you think the policy choice that was taken is is killing Mango per se, if you want to say so? And then on to Advocate Fick, thank you very much for your presentation. Advocate Fick, I only have just only three. I've never been much of a fan of business rescuers, because I always believe that they take too long. They just take too long. Instead of fixing the problem, they sometimes just take too long. And I feel they do that in order for them to also make money in the process. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my personal feeling. On the issue of the business, you spoke about the business rescue become binding for SAA and for the government. You spoke about the 2.7 billion, which has been redirected to Mango. And then you said this will open up lawsuits from creditors now if we're now taking this 2.7 billion now to Mango. My question now is, from the beginning, since Mango is the subsidiary of SAA, why at the beginning did the business rescuers not see or foresee that we were going to have issues with there were issues already with Mango? SAA is the parent of Mango. And now we find ourselves in the situation where SAA must get the whole 10.5 billion, and then Mango now must be left in the cold. And Mango have employed a lot of people whom are going to lose their jobs in this case if they don't get the 2.7 billion. And then, which is not right at all to happen to Mango. I believe that the business rescuers should have foreseen that from the beginning, and maybe their rescuing strategy should have included a Mango in this case. But maybe you can also just give us your better understanding to what I'm saying. But in the end of the day, I'm blaming the business rescuers for this mess that we find Mango in. And then to Kosatu, Mr. Parks, Mr. Parks, you spoke about something which I believe both the doctor and the advocate have left out, which is the human element of everything else that we're doing. In the end of the day, there are human beings whom are going to lose their jobs. There are human beings who haven't been paid. There are human beings who are losing their livelihood. Their children are suffering because of what has happened with Mango and SAA. And, your human element, to speak about the human element, I think that was very well, and you have really touched us on that one. On the issue of the COVID-19 vaccine, the pace, you're right, the pace is so slow. I don't know, to be number 26 in Africa in the vaccine, it makes absolutely no sense. South Africa is supposed to be number 1. But we were just moving in a slow pace. And I don't know, maybe the government of the day is doing this deliberately, or there's some backdoor deals which they're still busy with that haven't came out right. That is why you find ourselves moving in such a snail pace with vaccinating people. The more they are so slow, the more our people are dying. And I want to know that you as COSATU, what you're going to do about it, because I feel the government of the day needs a court case or something, because this is murder what they're doing. This is simply murder. I don't understand why are we moving at such a slow pace. Money is there. The issue of money is not a problem in South Africa. Money is there. But the way we're moving is just a sad thing, honestly. And then on the issue of the CCMA, yes, you are right. CCMA must be, must be protected at all times. It must be supported at all times. COVID-19 was just one of the first crises that we've seen, to deal with our economy. Obviously, there's going to be the next one and the next one and the next one after that. How is South Africa going to deal with the next problem that's going to come? It might be worse than COVID-19. How are we going to deal with it? So our CCMAs must make sure that at all times they are supported, they have enough money to make sure that people who loses their job are assisted. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Hlanyana. Honorable Kaiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And I want to welcome the presenters of this special appropriations bill public hearing meeting. Honorable Chair, I think to a larger extent, I want to agree with my colleague, especially on the issue raised by Honorable Matafa around how best does the presenters think Mango should actually operate, or increase its capacity with regard to the routes it's currently, undertaking, because it does appear to us that now, besides, looking after its operation and, its effectiveness in the industry. But the other thing is that indeed there are a lot of competitors there, but we also want to see it, being operational at a maximum level. So I want to check as to whether what does Outer think around this issue of Mango being able to operate at a maximum level instead of looking at just at one route between Gauteng, Cape Town, and very limited route. Of course, I want to agree with you see the issue of rescuing Mango. It should not be viewed just based on a bureaucratic approach that says or overlook the crisis which the economy is facing, and actually the challenge that Mango is facing and the SAA. Because I want to believe that the SAA contributes a lot to the economy or in the country, so including its subsidiaries, Mango. So there's also an element of economy there, and also an element of human being or people who are and families who are dependent on the jobs that have been created there. So it is very imperative that now whatever that it is developing there should not affect adversely workers there. And also we're expecting a lot of economic contribution or output from the operation of the SAA and its subsidiaries. Therefore, there has to be a rescue because one of the aim is to make sure that all the state-owned enterprise and company are in operation in order to develop the capacity of the state, you see. So now, this is a reason that now at least Mango must find assistance so that those workers who are there, they've been feeding families too. Their expectation is that they must be at work, earning some wages or salaries so that they can be able to make a living at the end of the day. But I also want to agree that perhaps there should be a way that also the business rescue in future find a way how to integrate the smooth transition when these challenges arises, especially of the, on finance. Let me come to the issue of that COSATU raised sharply, that I think one supports this issue that COSATU raising, especially around the issue of supporting the rollout of COVID-19 vaccine, and also the critical the critique that now there seems to be, we're moving at a very slow pace. And it is very important that maybe the government has to find a very radical way to, to speed up the vaccine rollout program, given the fact that scientists have already warned that we are approaching, the country is approaching the third wave of COVID-19. And therefore, this might complicate other areas, such as the areas that we thought we have dealt with regard to social relief, the 350 grant that was given so that we should alleviate poverty. So with the approach of the third wave, there is that likelihood that we should look into, supporting COSATU to say the bill have to amend in such a way that should accommodate all these threats moving forward for a reasonable period for now. So now, I think COSATU is right that on the issue of CCMA, because we can imagine, Honorable Chair, that CCMA, I think it plays a very critical role, in also helping in sustaining relations at the workplace level and intervene and make a resolve on the disputes of workers and therefore harmonize those relations. But in the absence of CCMA, we actually retarding, there will be more incident of retardation of production, and it will affect the effectiveness of many companies because there will be a lot of dispute. So in the absence of the assistance, of any assistance, we are inviting, there's a lot of invitation of trouble there. So perhaps there has to be a way that the government needs to respond and look as to how CCMA is going to be rescued. We want to welcome that approach that COSATU has taken, that it would now have engagement with the Department of Labor and convene relevant stakeholders there to see how can CCMA be assisted with regard to, getting some fund. But it's very important that the issue of CCMA be relooked. Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Honorable Peters, please come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I need to start by apologizing for the inconsistency of my network this morning, because I really struggled throughout from the first presenter to the last presenter. I even had to change gadgets to be able to connect. So I am upfront apologizing if I might ask something that is not in line with what has been presented, Chairperson. But I want to thank all the presenters from OUTA, Advocate Fick and Prof. Vermeulen from UJ, as well as from COSATU, Comrade Matthew Parks. Chairperson, I'm going to ask a generic question to all three presenters, and but also to thank COSATU and ALTA in particular for their consistency in appearing before this committee. I think it is encouraging to know that there are people who devote time to do research and to come and present before this committee. Like Honorable Floyane, I would want to say that it also helps open our eyes to areas that might be a blind spot to the work that we do. Thank you very much for that. But my question, Chairperson, that I say is generic, is what is the presenters saying should be done under the present circumstances? I know that the presenters are querying and questioning the rationale for the budget cuts, but what should be done under the present circumstances? I have heard COSATU on page 8 of the presentation speaking about the problems of corruptions, the litigations and inefficiencies from the public service, that the money wasted in those areas could be devoted to supporting the SRD and introducing, for lack of a better word, if I heard him well, the basic income grant. But I would want to say to COSATU, corruption and the malfeasance or the litigation and the inefficiencies or the incompetencies of the public service are not some things that can be budgeted for or planned for. And I think it is important that COSATU also appreciate the fight that a government is fighting against this corruption, and also the challenges that they have with regard to the process. And I think COSATU probably through their engagement with the Ministry of Public Service and Administration could be able to raise the issue of the incompetency or the incapacity of the state to deliver to some of the important areas that they need to deliver on. I think with regard to that, I think COSATU could also be of help. And I want to join Chairperson, my colleagues from Honorable Floyane. I didn't hear quite well what Honorable Matafa was saying, but Honorable Kaiso also raised the issues about the slow rollout of the vaccine. In essence, supporting the statement by COSATU that it is an indictment on us as a country that we should be number 26 in terms of the rollout. But you know, Chairperson, what surprises me is that if you go to the vaccination centers, it is packed on a daily basis. And they even allow for walk-ins. I've seen a very innovative approach by the Ekurhuleni municipality with a drive-through initiative. But when the figures are given, you get surprised because the figures are so low. And then you ask yourself, is it a problem of data capturing? Is it a problem of our vaccine registration system not being able to pick up? You'd find out probably at a later stage where we are told that there are backlogs. The day I went for the vaccination and the day thereafter, because I had taken it upon myself to take many of the senior citizens to go and be vaccinated, I realized that the teams that are working there are really professionals and understand. And they have also created an environment where people don't wait too long. And I asked one of the ladies who had worked in there, and she told me that the longest time you can spend at the vaccination center, that is the pre-vaccination assessment and the post-vaccination assessment, it's about 2 hours. the total time that they spend there, people are given coffee and tea, the human elements are being attended to, fruit is provided, and I think the professional nature. But what surprises me is the restriction of government to the 87 sites. Why the 87 sites when throughout the country we've got immunization sites where children are being immunized even from the hospital at the time of birth, when they turn 3 months and all those things, the Road to Health initiative, they do that consistently so. And at different intervals, there's mass vaccinations that has been happening with regard to polio and others. But when it comes to this one, the system seems to be coming in as if our health professionals would not know what they need to do. And I think the issue of even the storage has been resolved, that there's been indication that this vaccine can stay out of the refrigeration for quite a number of days before it goes off. So what is the problem in making sure that each and every clinic that is doing immunization in this country can be able to do that? But I also want to say, Chairperson, we as this committee, probably together with the department, the Portfolio Committee of Health, need to really follow up this particular issue, because it is encouraging to know that vaccinated people, even if they can get infected by COVID, it is not going to be debilitating, it is not going to be killing. So it will save lives. So it is important that people can be reassured that this initiative, the restriction to online registration is also a bit problematic. We who've been working online know that at times there's a network problem, there's delayed capturing, and you'd find that that is where the problem lies, where people have registered and they still have not even received acknowledgement of their registration status. So I think it is important that together as portfolio committees and standing committee, we could be able to look into this issue. Colleagues have covered extensively so the issue of CCMA, as well as the issue of the business rescue practitioners of the SAA, and the issues of a Mango. I don't want to belabor the point, as well as the issue of a CCMA. I just want to ask one question to COSATU. Did COSATU engage the Department of Labor as well as National Treasury with regard to this matter of a CCMA? But also, Prof. Vermoten, I just want to find out, what is your view with regard to the single transport economic regulator, especially with your concern about the Department of Transport and being the regulator and DPE being owner with regard to SAA? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Let me, any other honorable member would like to come in? Okay. Let me come in with my questions, and joining the other honorable members in thanking the presenters and for coming to the committee. I will start with Dr. Vermoten. Thank you for the presentation on the airline. My first question to you will be, Mango has always been there with the other airlines, and they were all in the skies. And the issues that you are raising now, why are they so relevant now? Because you seem to be saying, I'm just saying, why now? Why is it so much problematic? And you talk about all the competitive issues which arise because of Mango and so on and so forth. That's one. Two, what this bill also does, it tries to is recapitalization to SA Tech, So my question is, who are they competing with? Because as far as I know, SA Tech provides these services to not just SAA, but to many other airlines, and there is an IP which resides there, and so on and so forth. In fact, at the time when SA Tech was not operating, we were told that some of the aeroplanes had to fly to somewhere in the Middle East for them to be um, if there were some technical problems, or yeah. So who are they competing with? Now, let's come to the recapitalization of 90.8 billion rand. Again, I think one area which has been raised by the oral members is the question of other benefits which came from this, the employment that gave to the workers and the dependents thereof, direct and indirect, benefited from this. It's not just a dark hole, and that money just didn't disappear. Well, first and foremost, it saved livelihoods, but also it came back to the economy. It also allowed businesses to do business with SAA. So I sometimes think this notion of money going down the drain it becomes too simplistic, because that money is not banned. When government recapitalize, for instance, SAA, that money comes back to the economy in different ways. There's one thing that that is not always spoken about, that one of the things that SAA has done is the question of the the training of the pilots from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. No other airlines would have produced the pilots from a previously disadvantaged background, the victims of apartheid. Now you can talk of the pilots who are there, who have been trained. There was a cadet training program of SAA and so forth. So Doc, I think sometimes we we become too simplistic about this money just going down the drain. Your comment, please. I heard when you were speaking about, it's another question, basically saying that bringing or saving or rescuing Mango Airlines, we are killing a competition. That argument is based on the assumption is that in the airline industry, we're having a perfectly free market type of a situation, which we are not. We are dealing with an oligopoly here. And you know the problems of oligopolies. Primary amongst them is the question of collusion. So you take out a Mango, you'll be having a duopoly, because I think that there are two low cost airlines. But my point is that the argument that we are basing is that you are talking about there's perfect competition here. You are talking about a perfect free market, which is not the case. In fact, if an example which is not in the airline industry, it's what happened in the construction companies during the 2010 World Cup, where they colluded, and the state ended up paying a lot of money because of collusion. So I'm just saying that I would like to hear what you are saying, because it's definitely not a better free market. It's a duopoly, and I haven't heard. I wouldn't come up and say there's collusion there, but there's a problem of all the oligopolies, as you know. I think what Honorable Sonia started alluding to is the question of, so of the monopolizing certain routes. So we do have a monopoly of certain routes where it's known that it's a particular airline which goes to a particular destination, which is also not good for for competition. I'll tell you, my hometown is Pietermaritzburg, right? But to fly to Pietermaritzburg is so expensive and you don't have an alternative. So you end up being better to fly to Durban and then drive about 100 kilometers to Pietermaritzburg, because that route is just monopolized. So again, I think is the point that we're making, that definitely the argument about the government killing competition doesn't fly. I would like to hear your comment, because there's so much anti-competitive behavior in the airline industry. Go to Outer Advocate Fig. Thank you very much, and I think we hear your argument, and I must say that I wouldn't like to argue against the legality of what we are saying, because I know I always hear lawyers saying what qualifies you to comment on a legal matter. But can I then check with you that when one talks about South African Airways or any other company, doesn't that include the subsidiaries? For instance, many companies you talk about, where you talk about is this holding company, does that expressly exclude the subsidiary companies? Yeah, another question to you, Advocate. What would you say to the argument that, flowing from my first questions, where they say, no, the BRP plan has been implemented, and these are the savings that we have made. We're not coming to Parliament for any new money, but these are the savings that we have made in that process. And our understanding is that you can't talk of SAA without these subsidiaries. That these subsidiaries that are also part of SAA, but this is a pure savings, not that we haven't implemented the plan. The plan has been implemented, but these are the savings that we have made. What would your response be? Coming to Comrade Matthew Kosatu, I think there is no doubt about the impact of the special stress relief grant. It has been huge. We had numbers here about the impact that it had, for instance, on the provision of food security and nutrition. So there's no doubt about that. But you have been coming to this committee, you know that, and you are talking, you are correct, it's 2 billion rand per month to extend it. And that's 24 billion rand in 12 months. But one of the, that Parliament now has adopted the fiscal framework. And once it has been adopted, it cannot be broken. And definitely, and there are things that we are talking about, the savings. And as Honorable Peters was saying, those savings, there's no way you can say you're going to have those savings this year. What I was saying, I was saying that we must break the fiscal framework, and as you know that the Money Bills Act doesn't allow the committee to do that. How should that be dealt with? Question number 2, again going to Comrade Matthew. Comrade Matthew, you seem to be having a lot of drops. You keep on saying this one is a drop in the ocean, it's a drop in the ocean. I think these drops are becoming a rain now. For instance, the CCMA, it's a drop. There's the 2 billion rand, it's a drop. And I know if you go back again to yesterday's presentations, there are many drops there. And but I'm just saying that again, it goes back to what I'm saying: the fiscal framework being broken, and the debt that you have rightly spoken about. We end up having the debt explosion. What again we are concerned about: this country losing its sovereignty, having Bretton Woods institutions taking over, and you know what that means, right? So the argument has been, let's take that pain while you are responsible for our own economy. So what's your comment on that? My last question. The temporary employment relief scheme. I think there are so many instances where we hear that employers claimed on behalf of the workers, and the workers never received that money. I was hearing yesterday of a company which claimed about 60 million rand, and not a cent of that money went to its ultimate beneficiaries. And I'm hearing that all sorts of schemes now that are coming back. They want to come and say, no, we're going to pay back the money, but they want to pay it in installments and so on and so forth. Two things. One, that's outright fraud. And I think the labor with its workers on the factory floor should be able to raise those things, right? That's one. But what is worrying for me is that the union seems to be mute when it comes to this thing, because this big fraud, this is what we're talking about again when we talk about leakages, that there's so much fraud involved there, and these companies, they remain nameless. And sometimes we find that there are some schemes where companies will say, no, we're going to pay back that money, and that's it. And that's what also I've been hearing from Eskom. McKinsey lately was saying, no, we'll pay back the money. But that's not enough. We should not allow a situation where people pay their way out, because the first question is, how did you get that money? If it was a fraudulent transaction, then it means the law was broken. So let that be. But coming to you, COSATU, and the labor movement in general, government can't be on all the factory floor. The workers are there, but it looks like this TERS thing, the temporary employment relief scheme, was abused to quite a superlative degree. And one would say, what is the role of labor as far as that is concerned? I think I would allow you to come in the order that you presented. It means it to be Dr. Vermoten, and then Advocate Fig, and then Comrade Matthew Park in that order. Thank you very much. Dr. Vermoten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'll deal with all the issues within the context of the appropriation bill. There are many, many other issues, and I would try and refrain from giving aviation economics classes, but I need to mention a few if possible. So the Honourable Tafa raised a number of interesting issues. He is concerned that if mango is not there, then too little competition will remain. Now, in today's market, especially since food deliveries, or the offering of food service on aircraft has been banned, the only difference really between a low-cost carrier and a full-service carrier is the number of seats in the aircraft. Other than that, they are completely the same. With the market difficulties, it's more difficult to operate a full service aircraft with less seats today because your revenue level is actually based on the low cost pricing. So today on the main routes, fly South Air, Kulula, BA, Lift and Airlink. Those are the competitors of SAA. So you've got 5 competitors competing for market share with very keen tariffs. The difficulty is that one wouldn't like to waste taxpayers' money to actually subsidize competition, because the money goes to the beneficiaries or subsidize cheaper airfares, and there are many more critical priorities for government of real basic needs. So the issue of Mango and the availability of competition, there is enough competition of 5 competitors in the market. And secondly, if you stop financing Mango, it doesn't mean necessarily that Mango will end. Mango could have been sold for, a few billion, maybe a few months ago, but it's been operated, expanded in its operations from 4 aircraft, which it ran very profitably, to 14 aircraft. And that expansion, together with SAA's expansion, is just too much. And that is one of the major critical factors in airline restructuring, is you need to actually cut back your operations to reduce your losses to start off from the word go. One should remember that Mango operates in the larger, we call it gauge or size of aircraft. And the sizing of aircraft is your crucial decision if you start an airline. It's one of the 2 major decisions that airline management can take. It's like all your licenses for a scooter operation differs from operating a bus service. That's how different it is. You can't operate with the same licenses, your spares are different, and traditionally it's not a good thing to try and mix too many types of aircraft, because then it becomes a huge scheduling problem to have the correct spares for the type of aircraft. If you operate too many types of aircraft, you also need separate licenses for crews, and it becomes an impossibility to operate such services efficiently. So I don't see that there is a difficulty in competitive levels. I think it remains there. What there was the issue of choice. I think the Honourable Chair also raised the issue. Mango has always been there, but it hasn't. It was started up in 2006 when SAA found that the clientele that they needed to pay the high tariffs for their domestic services were no longer available. That doesn't mean that SAA doesn't cut fares. It competes because it wants to fill the aircraft. And in that regard, it offers some of the cheapest fares around, in the previous pre-COVID situation in any event, despite having larger costs. So at that time, it started off with 4 aircraft in Mango, and it was financed by SAA itself. It didn't come to government, and that's maybe the point. This is the first time that government is actually involved in deciding to fund Mango, because up to now, that was not a government requirement. Government was never called to finance Mango. But the issue is that all big airlines, if you take the United States, have started up low-cost airlines, and all of them have closed them down for the reason that the low-cost airlines were seen to be proof of concepts. Once they learn from that and adopt low-cost so-called lean production systems, in which they save cost in actually operating, they actually adopted those techniques within the mainline airline and closed down the low-cost proof of concept in order to prevent cannibalizing. So that was a choice for SAA on Mango, and SAA has had many various views on it. Just before going into business rescue, it actually decided to close down SAA's domestic operations completely and only have Mango as a low-cost offering with some business class seats because it was, it saw a more profitable or manageable way out. Then at the end of the business rescue, the plan is actually to restart domestic services and also retain Mango. This is what this appropriation bill would mean. And hence the difficulty of two state-owned airlines competing for the same market, cutting prices, and the taxpayer have to cough it up. So there are alternative options on Mango, and I think at another opportunity that should probably be properly discussed within the government and within Parliament of the actual need to actually operate in the low-cost market, or have SAA and a low-cost market, or why doesn't SAA adapt itself to actually market conditions, which has certainly been done by most of the international airlines. Also in Europe, you'll see that the low-cost airlines are independently run and independently operated. So that's the first issue on Mango. I don't know whether I've covered that issue. On its viability, if you expand an operation too much, you physically just have too much equipment to pay lease costs on, and you don't get enough support in the market with passengers supporting your services at reasonable tariffs, then suddenly you make losses. And that's the instance in Mango, I would presume, as well. It just expanded too much for the volume of traffic that it could muster, and hence it should have actually gone into a situation of a restructuring long time ago. I think it's really unacceptable just to run the airlines into the ground, not being able to pay staff, and then to come to government for some solution in funding. That is really not the way to go. The Honourable Shlonyana raised a few issues. That is the issue of wouldn't one shoot yourself in the foot? I don't think so. If SAA adopts low-cost costing structures, it will still be there under the new proposal to start up. And instead of competing, on prices between Mango and SAA, it's better to actually focus your attention on one thing and do that well. The other thing is the actual gauge. Some mentions were made, can't Mango operate on other services? That was the role that you'll remember that was played by South African Express, which operated smaller gauge aircraft. And for that, you need to actually operate smaller aircraft than Mango has been, or was in the business of Mango. So it's just impossible to operate your smaller routes with the larger equipment, because your losses in flying empty seats is just horrendous. It's much more than to operate smaller aircraft. So the choice of size of aircraft per route is really the determining factor. So Mango and SAA only operated on the large, or we call it the thick routes, the mainline routes, they didn't play any development role on smaller routes. They only operated on the fully fledged commercial routes. And that's where the question comes in, is that of any strategic need for the government, especially if they run at losses? I would not like to create the impression that I'm anti-national carriers. There are many national carriers, for example, Lufthansa and British Airways, that still identify with the values of those countries, but they are no longer funded by governments. They are listed companies and they operate according to financial disciplines of the market. And we should remember that SAA was not that long ago a profitable airline. I was involved in the team that turned it around from 2007 to 2008. And then it was run from 2009, 10 and 11 at a very profitable basis. But then the mission changed of SAA and a number of other factors. And that's where we sit today, where in the way that we do things, we actually incur 5.5 to 6 billion rands of losses. And that's not necessary to do. So I think that has really covered the issue there. So on the issue of Mango, there are other possibilities for, instead of closing up Mango, it could be actually sold. I think it's possible to restructure it, although it would have been better a year or two ago. But it's a better option to do that just then, instead of letting the company run out of money and not being able to pay your staff and to pay creditors. I think those type of things are evident long time before, and one should adjust to market circumstances and adapt accordingly. And Mango very clearly did not do that. It retained the leasing costs whilst it's not able to operate those aircraft. The points made by the Honourable Maisao, I think that related to how do we operate Mango at the maximum level. That included the issue of smaller routes and SAA's contribution to the economy, which the chair also raised. I would again like to stress that at the moment SAA's contribution to the economy is zero. And yet people are able to fly and the demand is actually taken care of, except on the international side, which we are closed to. But I refer again to the period up to 2011, where SAA was actually run profitable, and it was not necessary to have this huge hole in the budget to actually fund. On the issue of workers, I think that's a very important matter to raise. The workers are certainly important. The appropriation bill doesn't deal with the worker situation. It only deals with the situation of providing money for Mango, in which the creditors will again form the bulk and the workers not necessarily be the case, as has been with SAA and with SACS and now Mango. I would think it's rather better to do your planning properly, retrench all the people, and start with a clean slate if you want to do that. But just to stop paying your workers, I don't think that's unacceptable. So I'd just like to make that clear. But the appropriation bill doesn't deal with that. But I think that the matter should come back to, if the Appropriation Committee doesn't approve this reallocation, then government should come back to the Appropriations Committee with a proper presentation on how to deal with these things, how to position them, and how to deal with workers in a reasonable and fair way. Let me just see. The chair had other questions that related to the stage of Mango's development. So SAA has not been clear. You know, at times it wants to close down Mango, other times it wants to close down SAA domestic. But at the moment, the plans on the table is to actually operate the two together in competition. Mango at a too large size of operations, and we're still to see what size SAA will be. But that is not the way to go, in my opinion. You raised the issue of training of pilots. The cadet program that was really run by South African Express. The SAA cadet program was closed down many, many years ago. Unfortunately, we don't have the training system that we used to have. And most countries actually train up their pilots through the military by doing through the Air Force. It's part of that system, and that's part of the benefits of having an Air Force, to actually have a continual flow through and a training element to that. That was unfortunately stopped. And then the cadet program was started by South African Express, which unfortunately was lost due to the issue of South African Express being run into the ground and now is under liquidation. So, you know, there's many ways that one can recreate that, but that wasn't the role of Mango. Mango didn't have a cadet program. It actually employs staff with quite high hours, which is the same way as other low-cost airlines do. So I think that is another issue which at a point should be addressed. The issue of a perfect free market, we definitely don't have a perfect free market. We've got a very diligent competition authority, and we've seen the situation. I think the Honourable Peters also raised it, on the issue of choice of competitive markets.
Just a second.
Certainly,
There's noise which is getting loud and louder. Where is it coming from? And then can everybody else mute and allow Dr. Vermeulen to speak? Doc, sorry for interruption.
Certainly. Okay, I think if we look back at history, we had competition between Comair and SAA. SAA then foreclosed the market with travel agents override commission schemes, and it was found guilty to monopolizing the market. That whole case took about 14 years to adjudicate, which is too long to actually get redress. And in that interim period, Comair started at Kalula. I don't know whether they would have done that if it wasn't for the monopolizing of the travel agents' commission overrides. But one has to remember that the aviation business differs from the big construction companies. In the aviation business, you've got many, many small buyers who actually conclude individual voluntary contracts. So the whole issue is, do you have open entry? If there's entry is open to the market, then if people, develop too much profits, then more competitors will actually enter the market. It doesn't seem to me as if there's a big profitability in the local airline industry, and that's one of the issues that we've been pleading for a lot of time, because the big trick is really to balance your supply of capacity or flights and size of aircraft to your real demand for your product and services. And actually getting to grips to that situation, the whole American airline industry was turned around about 2010, and it has been very profitable up to 2019. Unfortunately, we have to adjust to the COVID situation today. Right, so the reason that this is the Mango issue is because this is the first time that government is requested to pay money for Mango's purposes, and there are many difficulties with that, as I said a little bit earlier. The chair asked the question, SAA technical? Yeah, SAA technical is an operation which there is local competition, but it operates on a worldwide basis. It would actually do much better as a separate state-owned enterprise or a separate listed company with the state as a shareholder or even not as a shareholder, but then it can decide its own mission. Sitting below SAA brings the problem that it just don't get enough money to be able to operate and get the right equipment and systems and so on. And secondly, it could have a different mission. It could actually go out. It's not restricted to South Africa as airlines are, but a good example that I usually demonstrate it is the case of Sabina Technics, which is a worldwide organization today. And technical operations are able to operate worldwide. But again, it needs a business case. It needs a presentation to actually justify it. And that is what is lacking at the moment. We can't just give money and not be clear on what the commitments will be for the future. Chair, I may have missed out a few things, but I thought those are the main issues that affected me. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Advocate Fee?
Thank you, Chair, and again, really appreciate the opportunity to address some of the issues, and I hope I can answer some of the questions that the honourable members had. Might I start by saying, business rescue is a legal process, but one must understand, although it's a legal process, and believe me, it sometimes can be extremely complicated, but the purpose of business rescue is to provide for efficient rescue and recovery of our financially distressed company in a manner that balances the right and interests of all relevant stakeholders. And what I've heard from this committee is that we do take the interests of employees quite seriously. Now, this is what Business Rescue, one of the things that Business Rescue look at, is you can appreciate that at SAA, there were not enough money to pay all the employees. And we made reference in this committee to the loss of employment. That is what Business Rescue is for, is to look at those interests and balance all the rights and come with the best plan in order to, make sure that everyone's rights are looked at the best possible way. Now, this is what happened at SAA. SAA's board of directors realized that they are running into trouble, and that they have a duty, because otherwise they will be delinquent, that they have a duty to their staff, they have a duty to their creditors to say, we can't pay all our bills, and if SAA just continued, it's possible that there wouldn't have been money at all to even save SAA. So in order to look at all these rights, Business Rescue was important. To understand Business Rescue, you need to, and the question was asked, why wasn't Mango part of the Business Rescue? Now, firstly, that was not the Business Rescue's mandate, and whether I agree with the honourable member, whether they were paid too much money, most probably, and that money could have been used probably, but you know what, they did a job, they were paid for their job, but their mandate was not to look at subsidiaries, and one must understand subsidiaries. Subsidiaries are independent companies on their own. They have their own board of directors. They have a board of directors that must look after the company and the company's interest. And therefore, it's no surprise that when the Business Rescue practitioners looked at SAA, they didn't necessarily look at the subsidiaries. But the question that comes up is, but why are we talking about Mango? are we agreeing that Mango is in financial distress? Because this appropriation bill wants to give money to Mango. So the first question is Mango in financial distress? Does Mango need the money? If the answer is yes, then the first question is, but why aren't they in business rescue? Because the board of directors need to take the interests of all the parties into account. So that one can have a look at, but how dire is the financial situation, and then find the best possible plan for that particular situation. But to just say, and please be mindful of the fact that we are saying the business rescue plan is binding. You cannot change it. And therefore, you cannot use any vehicle, go against the Companies Act and use this appropriations bill to give money to Mango. But of that, let's consider this. You have SAA that had financial constraints. Government decided to bail them out, and there was a business rescue plan. So what is most important is that we need to, isn't the objective to save SAA? So we need to save SAA. And then we start talking about Mango, which I actually don't understand, because if they are in financial distress, hopefully they will go into business rescue. But let's put it on a different playing field. We have SAA that's obviously got employees. They've got stakeholders, but most importantly, we all agree that employees, we're looking after the rights of employees. Now they want to take 2.7 billion rand away from SAA to give to a company. Why? Because we haven't established that they are in financial difficulty. And if they were, then hopefully they will follow the law and follow a process, either liquidation or business rescue, because that's in the best interest of their employees. But back to SAA, you now want to take money away from a big company that you want to save. In your own words, you want the national courier, but you take money away that was given to that company and give it to someone else. Now, we are first saying that is against the law. You cannot do that. There is no legal way of doing it, and that the appropriations bill is actually in that sense illegal. But let's put it on a more emotional footing. You have two children as government. You have two children. You have SAA and you have Mango, SA Technical and Airships. Now, SAA, you see, is having a cold. So you take SAA to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes certain medication. In the meantime, and I have to accept that this is the argument, in the meantime, you now realize that, but your other child is also sick. We just take the pills from the one child and give to the other child, because what's going to happen? This child is not going to become healthy again. And you're probably treating the other child without knowing what is wrong, because the one child may have had the flu, but the other child may have had something totally different. And by giving the one child the other child's pills is not at all going to work. So if we are extremely serious about the employees of both these companies, and I have to accept that all of you apparently agree that Mango is in financial difficulty, the best advice one can give is that they should go and look at the cause and go either the business rescue route or liquidate the company, because that would be in the best interest of your employees so that they can get at least something. Now, the chair has made mention of, but what if the BRP plan has got savings? Now, except for the fact that I think I can say clearly that SAA's problems was enormous, and that the chances of there being any savings is slim to none. But firstly, legally, I don't know if the committee can remember, the BRP, the business rescue practitioners, is bound by, government is bound by, SAA is bound by the plan. And the plan told everybody how this money must be utilized. But let's say for some miracle, there is savings. You know what should happen? One should turn to the employees who sacrifice some of their salaries that was supposed to accept certain conditions under the business rescue plan and said, yes, one should go back to the creditors who didn't get their full amount owed to them. They had to also accept certain conditions because of the business rescue. One should go back to them and offer them the opportunity to, to take some of the savings if there is, and one should share it with them. And I think while talking, one can appreciate the snowball effect. If you're trying to save the one company and you use some of that savings in order to save another company, you're going to sit with 2, 3, 4, 5 companies struggling and none of them doing anything. But it brings me back to my original question, is are we then sure that Mango is in financial distress? And that if that is the case, the law says you need to go into business rescue. And the two is separate because there are state-owned companies, both of them, and it's separate. Remember, Mango has been separate from SAA all along. They have their own, they dealt with their business on their own. But the question was, and I think this is most important, but what should we do? Now, our solutions is sort of clear, is that Section 3, not 1 and 2 of the Special Appropriation Bill, but Section 3 should be scrapped. In other words, allowing SAA then to be bailed out. Remember, I said that as ALTA, we were not necessarily in favor of SAA being bailed out because taxpayers' money are being wasted, and that government should concentrate on doing business of government. And maybe the private sector or whatever is better suited to deal with some of these entities. But now government has decided to bail them out. So on behalf of taxpayers, the question is, you have now given and bailed out SAA. Please use that money to bail them out and continue with rescuing SAA instead of trying to save everybody. And then look separately at Mango. Remember, I said, please do not consider this submission to say, because we didn't deal with that issue, whether in terms of policy and an emotional decision, whether one should save if Mango is in financial difficulty, whether the state should bail them out or not. That is a totally different issue. And if government has the money, and government is transparent in how they deal with then the financial distress of this state-owned entity, it can do that, but it's a separate it's sort of a separate procedure. So people losing their jobs, yes, that's why we are saying please keep the money that was allocated to SAA in those people. And, one should be respectful to the people and the stakeholders. That was part of that extremely difficult process. It was a very difficult process, very emotional process for a lot of workers and stakeholders. They should get the money that was promised to them. So how can Parliament approve? I think that one has to give a round of applause to the members of Parliament that goes out of their way to make sure that things happen in South Africa. There's always room for improvement, and that's probably why the question was asked. And maybe just this is that one should carefully look at how SAEs are managed, that we do not get in a situation where taxpayers' money needs to go after bailing out, for example, an SAA. One can, in isolation, say that SAA is needed, yes, but so is our children. Education is extremely important. So is the fact that we have children walking to school because there's no infrastructure. People still, in this day and age, do not have water. And we need to channel some of the funds to where it is really, really, really needed. But be that as it may, all I can say is that Mango and SAA should be considered as two different entities in law, but also on an emotional level, because we need to look after the employees. If Mango is in financial distress, we need to look after those employees' rights. Their rights are not more or less important than the rights and the employees here at SAA. Thank you again for the opportunity to answer some of the questions. I hope I've addressed some of them. And I can only, applaud this committee for their work. Just as a final note, if you look at Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3, one of the things that's missing in Section 3 is the reason why Mango, SA Technical, and Air Chefs, why they need the funds. 1 and 2 both say it's urgent funds, and one can appreciate it. COVID-19, vaccines, money needed, the 350 Rand that is desperately needed. Those are urgent situations. But the reasoning in Section 3 is missing. One do not see why all of a sudden this special appropriation is needed. And if we look at everything as a whole, that's why we are saying that it's easy to come come embroiled in a policy and in emotional decisions, but sometimes it's just purely legal, and that use the legal system and use your procedures in a way that will benefit each and everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Advocate Fig, for your maiden interaction with the committee. We are listening, and again, so I think Dr. Vermoten, it was also a maiden interaction with us, and as my colleagues have said, that the issues that you are raising, they are getting into our heads, and definitely they'll get us thinking. Thank you. Matthew?
Okay. No, thanks, Comrade Chair. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, honourable members, for the questions. I think to Honourable Matafa, and I think also to Sister Poor, Honourable Peters, on the issues of corruption. And we know there's no easy solutions to it. We know colleagues in Treasury also say we don't budget for corruption. It's not as if you can just simply say, press a button and you stop it. But the fact is, when you lose hundreds of billions of rands from national to provincial to local government to SOEs, etc., when the fiscus is undergoing extreme stress and we're making painful choices to cut, we have to do much better on tackling corruption. So Honourable Matafa is 100% correct. I mean, Parliament, the 5th Parliament passed a very bold Amendment Act to the Auditing Act. But we've only seen, if I'm correct, one official feeling the brunt of that act. It gives significant powers, Honourable Chair members, to government to personally hold financially liable offending officials, be it management, be it supply chain, be it the executive office bearers, etc. Let them feel the pinch. So government must use the powers that it's got there. We think, Chair, we shouldn't be reluctant to seize the assets of those who have been charged and accused, etc. I think it's only when you start doing it one by one that those who are also guilty will start panicking and correcting their ways. But right now we've seen a culture of impunity across the nation where people can see that they can get away with it. They don't have any fear of consequences. I think, Comrade Chair, some positive news that we had seen in the past year at ESCOM was when ESCOM started doing the civil claims route to get back some of the money from Bain Capital, Mackenzie, etc., and other persons. I think we must appreciate the role of the media in exposing these corruption scandals week after week. But again, we have to ask, where is the NPA, police, and the courts? Because they are the ones who've got the legal powers to bring people, to charge them, to attach their assets, take them to court. But we can't have a situation, Comrade Chair, where we charge a mayor or whomever and then we don't bring them to court. We need to see justice moving with much greater speed, and we would really want to see corruption cases being prioritized. It can't be a situation where we can accept the court rolls taking 5 years at a time. That is one of the issues we had raised as COSATU with government last year on the issues of corruption. I think also to Honorable Peters on the issue of corruption. And look, I think Honorable Peters is 200% correct. All of us must play a role. We've raised this with our affiliates and our shop stewards. We're undergoing training programs for them to say when they see corruption in their parastatals, their departments, municipalities, they need to start blowing the whistle on corruption much more aggressively. But to also to be fair to them, we lost members as a consequence. I think we know in the instance of Limpopo and Vembe, where some shop stewards who blew the whistle on corruption there were murdered. No one has gone to jail as a consequence for their matters. We've given a report yesterday to the ANC at Lutulias on numerous municipalities where municipal workers have been dismissed by councillors for exposing corruption. So these are part of the issues that will be placed by ourselves, have been placed by ourselves already on the agenda for the Alliance Political Council next week, that you want workers to blow the whistle on corruption. We need to make sure that we are protecting them when they do so. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to motivate them to continue to do so. And we appreciate it's going to be a tough fight. I mean, that's also, Comrade Chair, why we had welcomed the recent moves by the leadership of the ANC nationally to start cleaning up house internally at a national, at a provincial level. I think that gives a good positive signal. More must be done because this corruption is across the board, from national to a local ward, etc. To Honorable Hlonyana, sorry. I would agree with Honorable Hlonyana 100% about business rescue practitioners. The law might say one thing, but the practical reality of workers is not the same. What we've seen with the BRPs at SCA is that they were fleecing the state left and right. And in fact, they were ignoring the mandate of government to save SCA. We've seen in the mining industry in Aurora and other places where BRPs come in, they make a profit out of the process and they leave mine workers, other workers, penniless. In Aurora, those workers are waiting a decade still, haven't received the money. But the BRP guys make a very healthy killing out of it. I think that's the right word to use, Comrade Chair. This is an issue we had raised with the Finance Committee at an earlier hearing last week on the Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill. We actually need to amend the Insolvency Act because it's got a ranking criteria upon who is first in the line when a company is liquidated and its assets are distributed or wound up. And workers all too often, especially in the private sector, are last in the queue. The positive part about this bill that Treasury drafted is that it's going to provide protection for pensioners and workers and other depositors when banks go under in future. So I think we need to have those kind of creative discussions. I think also, Honorable Hlonyana is right. We had raised deliberately the issue of the impact of human beings on what's happening in the SAA group. And I think it's very fine for all of us to say SAA is terrible, it's this, it's that, but you're dealing with 11,500 workers and their families, largely women, who have been left destitute. It took repeated interventions by the Minister, Comrade Godin, ourselves, with the UF, to get some UIF funding to these guys. There was endless delays. There's also the issue of the impact upon the value chain in the tourism sector, but even at the Airports Company of South Africa, which has been one of the more profitable SOEs, but itself is feeling the pinch because of the pandemic, but also because of the problems at SCA. And in fact, they've had to undergo retrenchments themselves of significant amounts of staff. But look, Comrade Chair, I think the bottom line is SCA was profitable. Mango itself was actually generating profits for the SCA group and for government. We think it can be fixed. We're not talking about a dead horse, but obviously you need to have a serious turnaround plan. It does need restructuring, repurposing, and Comrade Chairman, the bailouts cannot be endless. I think this would be the last year of the bailouts, to be honest. Obviously, government must still meet its debt obligation requirements, and it can't walk away from them. They must be paid and settled. But I think that's why, Comrade Chair, we had said, let government bring the SAA turnaround plan, table it at Parliament, so government SAA can be held accountable to it. It can't be a culture of blank checks anymore. That ship has sailed and it's gone. The Honourable Hlonyana, on the issue of the vaccines delays, I must say we've raised this issue time and again. We raised it actually at the end of December last year when we felt the government had not come with a serious vaccine plan yet. We raised it publicly the beginning of January. We have met the Minister, Dr. Mkhize, the President, other ministers. We're meeting the Department of Health numerous times a week. In fact, we're meeting them, the Vaccine Coordinating Council tonight as well at, I think, 5 o'clock. We've raised these concerns time and again, and I think we've offended people at times, but it's fine. We must point out blunders to try to find solutions. We can't explain to Sister Poor Peters why we're having these delays in the vaccine rollout. It's inexplicable. You can't explain it. And the consequences that the elderly, the most vulnerable, are going to pay the price, unfortunately. It's impossible to explain this level of chaos. It's impossible to justify it. I mean, we all want to see government succeed. So we're not throwing stones because we want to see government fail. We want to try to assist. We really had hoped, and time again, we get disappointed by the Department of Health in the slowness of the vaccine plans. You know, Honourable Peters, Honourable Chair, governors not vaccinating over the weekends. And when we ask them the reason, they're told, no, they can't afford overtime pay, which doesn't make sense because hospital staff work 7 days a week. That's already factored in and budgeted for. They have not increased the vaccination numbers of health workers. It's been stagnant at about 475,000 for the last couple of weeks. We were told that the vaccine rates will increase to 100,000 by Monday, this past Monday. It hasn't. It's still at about 20, 25,000 a day. But whatever it is, Committee is not working. It needs to be fixed, and it requires the highest intervention because all of our lives and the economy depend upon it. But I mean, on a positive note, more sites are being added onto the stream each day. There's a site in the one mine at Rustenburg which has come online. There's a site at one SOE which has come online. But we need to see more sites come on board. From our side as Labour, we have offered sites in the Clothing and Textile Bargaining Council where you've got health clinics. We've also motivated to utilize other SOEs like the airports, which are offered sites. But government needs to do much more and business needs to do much more to assist. But hopefully there'll be some momentum and things will start improving. But again, Chair, you can't explain why Zimbabwe, with all of its issues and with greatest of respect to Zimbabwe, has physically vaccinated more people than South Africa. And yet Zimbabwe's got a quarter of our population size. It just, you cannot explain it. And governors had all the time to do its homework. To Honourable Hlonyana and I think Paiso and Tupuas Peters raised the issue with CCMA, and we've raised the issue with CCMA because it's such a critical tool to protect workers. It's such a valued public institution. Workers can't afford to go to labor courts. You have to pay for expensive lawyers. Your case will take 2 years. The amount of money you'll spend on your lawyers will be more than the salary you would have received if you're successful. CCMA is free, it's quick, you don't need lawyers, etc. But the CCMA is collapsing. And we're not exaggerating. Engage the CCMA leadership. They've raised it countless times. So we have raised it at Parliament in the budget hearings already from October last year. We have raised it with the Honourable Minister of Employment and Labour, with the DG. We've raised it with Treasury, with the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the DG. We've raised it with the President. And from October last year, January this year, throughout. We've placed it on the agenda for the Lions Political Council next week. And look, and I know Honourable Chairperson got me on the issue of many drops, but we think, you know, an amount of 300 million rand for the CCMA, that definitely is a small drop, Comrade Chair, in a Pacific Ocean or Indian Ocean. But it's such a critical thing because the impact upon CCMA is devastating. It's devastating. But I think, Chair, so the question that Honourable Peters would always ask is, so where will you get the money from because of the fiscal crises? We think there's money available in the CETAs. The CETAs is workers and its employers' contributions. We've tabled that specifically. Let's engage as Treasury, as business, as Labour. Tap into the CETAs. Can we assist with some funding there? And that can be done. So we're trying to also come up with solutions. And we know it's easy to throw stones at government, and we love to do that, but we also want to provide solutions to it. And Chair, look, I mean, our proposal was that either we reverse the CCMA cut in this bill, or allow government the space to do their reprioritization, reviewing of the budget, come with a supplementary bill like they did last year fairly smoothly, or you have in the medium-term budget policy statement, the space for government to adjust the funding mechanisms as allocation as they always would do. But we think of all the institutions, and we appreciate the pressure on Treasury. Every institution government is crying and harassing them probably, but we think some are more worthy than others, and CCMA would definitely be a very worthy one, Honourable Chair. I think Honourable Peters asks, I mean, a critical question, which we try to provide some ideas and solutions in our submission, Comrade Chair. What should be done? I mean, so I think on SA, we must have a turnaround plan at Parliament. We can't afford blank checks. The vaccine sites, the vaccine rollout, open all sites and increase with the logistical support, the numbers from 20,000 a day to 200,000 a day. The 350 grant, Comrade Chair, we think, look, that does, I mean, you're right, 24 billion rand is a large drop. It's not a small drop like the CCMA one. That's a significant drop, but we still think it's such a worthy cause. It's something that Treasury would be well placed to squeeze a little bit more out of other departments to find the space for it. And there are spaces for it, Comrade Chair. You know, I mean, the fact that we could spend 13 billion rand building head offices for 5 departments, and a council in New York and a Tshwane municipality head office, it shows you there is some space. We can look at the issue of consultancy, appropriations, you know, in terms of departments. There is space. Many departments have also been able to save money, Chair. Today we had a meeting at NEDLAC on NEDLAC's budget, where we've managed to save 10 million rand, so 20% of the budget, by reducing the travel allowances, you know, the travel, planes, hotels, venues, etc., catering. So do we think there is space if we can all contribute? I think just last question for Honourable Peters. I mean, look, as COSATU, we've also tried to play our own little role to assist government. So that's why we came with the ESCOM Social Compact, why we said we're willing to support the PIC, assisting ESCOM to reduce its debt burden. That's why we managed to push the UF to invest in EDCON when it was collapsing 2 years ago. Why we've managed to push out almost 70 billion rand from the UF to assist companies to stay afloat, and why we've also embarked upon an aggressive buy local campaign as unions to say what can we do also to assist government, assist industries, the economy, etc. I think just coming to your last few questions, Honourable Chair, look, from our side, I don't think we would agree with Outer that it's illegal to empower SEA to share the funding within the SEA group. We think the bill provides exactly that. It provides a legal cover for that to be done. It's not a constitutional issue. The bill is providing that legal cover. I think, Comrade Chair, just your questions about the drops. I must come up with another metaphor next time when I appear before you. Next thing, we're talking about Sahara Desert, how drops evaporate before they land on the ground. Look, we would agree, Comrade Chair, that on the debt issue and the fiscal ceiling, that we can't tax our way out of the situation. We can't print money and spend, because the consequences will be devastating. It'll be hyperinflation. It'll be going to the IMF for a bailout. It'll be a structural adjustment program where workers would pay the price, pensioners would suffer. But we think to address that, you have to address the fiscal leakages in the state, the corruption, the mismanagement, the mismanaged SOEs, recapacitating SARS, and so forth. But it's also, Comrade Chair, why we've also pushed from our side to put our own little rands and cents into the pot, hence the UIF, the PIC, etc. And hence we've also supported amending Regulation 28 to help invest money into the economy, in infrastructure, etc. I think last question, Comrade Chair, and I know you want to hold COSATU to account, which is correct. On the issue of TERS, look, we took a deliberate decision with government at the beginning of the pandemic last year with business to make access to the UF COVID-19 TERS as easy as possible to avoid delaying workers for months and months when they needed to get money quickly. It was a gamble because you knew there are going to be some crooked elements who will take advantage of the system. But the UF is had always had a plan. They must move faster on it. Of course, follow the money, where they go to each employer and say, now that we're giving you your 10,000 Rand or whatever it is, show us the payment statements to that worker. And when those employers are found wanting, the UF has been recovering the money. So I think to date, they've recovered about 3.5 billion Rand from such employers. There is about 70 cases of employers who have been charged or workers who have been charged with fraud. They are starting to ramp it up, and we're getting weekly reports from them about how many they've chased and so forth. But look, it was a gamble, and we had to say, let's err on the side of workers who need to get money into the pockets quickly, knowing we do have a serious problem of leakage. But I think if there's any specific companies you have as well, I mean, also please share it with us, because we will immediately share it with the commissioner. The acting commissioner has been quite helpful trying to clean up the UIF, get the systems working, etc. And the UF, I mean, I think they've tried to assist, because they've tried to assist to make sure that money gets to workers. So that when the employers are found wanting, the UF gives them a second chance. Say, pay this money to the workers in the next few days, otherwise we're taking you to court. A lot of employers then start panicking and they do that. But you're right, we have to stop mollycoddling people. We've also shared with our shop stewards what the UF has given to us, the list of all companies who receive the monies, because often there was a suspicion that money is being taken, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly. Chair, I think also that, look, we haven't been silent on it as COSATU. I mean, we went public on the UF issues throughout from March, April last year, much to the irritation of the Minister of Employment and Labour, who was very annoyed with us that we were being a bit too harsh. But it was done in a constructive spirit, trying to assist. But I think we've also had good positive assistance from the Minister, Comrade Klesi, when Comrade Pravin was acting Minister, Comrade Godan, the new commissioner, the DG, have tried to assist. We had also intervened to get GTAC on board to assist in building UF systems, because the UF systems are very archaic, if I can be honest. SARS has tried to assist, and the presidency also has tried to assist. But I think what we all saw, Comrade Chair, and I think it's not just UIF, where it's got ancient systems, the compensation fund, NSFAS, the systems don't speak to each other. Yet government would always tell you the systems are synchronized, and they're not. So it is a challenge, and we need to modernize these systems. But lastly, I think, Chair, if I can say the last thing on UIF and then end, we are having further engagement with the UIF Commission and the team. They've agreed to extend assistance for vulnerable workers, so workers over 60 or workers with comorbidities who haven't received the vaccines yet and they can't work safely at work, to give them some relief. It's a small amount, but it's still. We are having further engagement with UIF and with business about those parts of the tourism, hospitality, sports sectors which can't operate yet fully because of the gatherings numbers, to give them assistance. But the condition is you must be registered with the UF, you must be in good standing. We can't give you a free lunch. But I think, let me stop there, Comrade Chair. I think I've definitely exceeded my time and your indulgence. Thanks, Comrade Chair.
Thank you so much, Comrade Matthew. It's no, it's fine. I think these are issues of national importance that are being raised here, and as my fellow colleagues were saying, that it's always good to engage these things, because there are some blind spots that must also be made aware of, and to get the other perspective. I've got National Treasury on the platform. Dr. Mampo, do you want to make any comments? There are so many comments which have been made here. Dr. Mampo?
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, we have prepared presentations for comments. I just want to check, Chair, how many minutes do we have?
How many minutes do you need? I think it's
About 20.
Okay, let's see. Let me give you 15.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. I will be taking you through some of the responses, but I have Tepiso on the line, Chairperson, who will assist with some of these SOCs. So, Chairperson, I think firstly, what we need to acknowledge is that the budget is an executive budget, is not a treasury budget. And when we come to Parliament, we just representing what the executive has agreed. So I think the interpretation that Treasury refuses to increase social grants or Treasury refuses to allocate funding, it's not fair because we always go to cabinet and cabinet makes the budget decisions and they're not Treasury decisions. Chairperson, there were other comments that were made in different platforms where they deal with the division of revenue and they are not appropriation bills specifically. But I think what I wanted to basically start with is just a comment on improving the participation for the formulation of the budget. I think what we want to emphasize here as the Treasury is for us to use NETLEC as a structure of this consultation because it already exists, rather than having individual groups coming to contribute to the Treasury. And what we also have to keep in mind is the market sensitivity of the information, because if it leaks, then it can definitely impact the markets. What we also have to do, Chairperson, which is what we try to do, is to strike a balance between allocating funds to best performing programs vis-a-vis the non-performers. What we have seen is that just because a program is not performing, it doesn't mean it is not necessary. We can't move resources altogether from programs that are non-performing. I think what we have to look at is how do we improve these non-performing programs so that funding is definitely allocated efficiently. I'm not going to talk about corruption. I agree with the comments that have been made. In terms of the specific issues, I think when we looked at the contributions by OUTA and COSATU in terms of corporate governance, there were some contradictions there, but basically what we're looking at is the fact that nationally raised revenue to municipalities are constitutional obligations, and basically most of the issues that were raised here were dealt with during the division of revenue. In terms of the communications and digital technologies, the performance information can be accessed through the APPs of the departments, but basically what we need to look at is an enabling policy environment and basically or institutional framework for the digital economy, which is highlighted in the minister's speech. Basically, in terms of water and sanitation, I think what was key here, Chairperson, was how do we look at the budget structure change from activity-based structure to more objective-based structures. And basically this will allow for better costing of these programs and strengthening the link between budgets and information. In terms of transport, one issue that came up from the different discussions, Chairperson, was the money for the road accident fund. I mean, of course, the members are aware that we use the fuel levy for this, and there's no allocation in the appropriation bill. But I think the issues that were raised in terms of broader policy consideration and financing of the motor vehicle accident victim is what we have been speaking to in terms of public transport. And I think the DG of Transport or the Department of Transport is looking at bringing back the REPS bill back to Parliament for consideration so that we can deal with the funding pressures in terms of the road accident fund. The defense issues are quite a lot, but I think, Chairperson and honorable members, there is no department that came to present to you and said they don't need funding. Everyone in the system is under pressure, and as you were aware, they are feeling the pressure of the budget reduction. So for most of the departments, the main presentations were about the funding pressures. And what we do try and do, Chairperson and honorable members, as the Treasury, is to try, one, to help the departments look at how they can effectively reduce the spending without affecting service delivery. Most of these departments, Chairperson, they have used most of the resources that they saved from less traveling or COVID affected spending. So most of this funding has been moved, and what they have done was that they moved it to other pressures where they were feeling pressure. But Tshepiso will speak about Janelle. I'm just going quickly to basic education. I think most of the questions were more about, how do we then deal with the compensation of employees in basic educations, and most of those, Chairperson, would be division of revenue bill. However, what I wanted to say to the committees that when we looked at the fiscal framework, we tried to save what we refer to as infrastructure spending. So most of the grants in basic education, such as basic or education infrastructure grant and the school backlog grant, were partially saved because they are infrastructure, and one of the elements of the budget is to protect infrastructure. And then what we also tried to cushion in this department, Chairperson, is the National School Nutrition Program, because we understand its value and its importance. So basically, over the 3 years, there's a 25 billion allocation, and what was reduced over the MTF is only 24 million of the 25 billion. And Chairperson, there was other issues on why education was not classified as a frontline department. And I mean, of course, that was not a Treasury decision. This was a decision taken from the NCC. Chairperson, as you may be aware, funding for the NSFAS were reprioritized within the department's budget for this year. But of course, the department did present to you the consequences of this. And there has been a cry, Chairperson, on capacitating the South African Revenue Services. We did allocate 3 billion to SARS in the MTBPS, and over the 3 years. So basically, when we looked at and we assessed what the funding was for, we thought that they will have, well, when they submitted their request, the amount that was allocated to them is sufficient for them to do the mandate. So I'm not too sure when colleagues say we need to capacitate SARS, does it mean additional funding or not? But when we did the evaluation, of course, we found that what we have allocated to them is sufficient. In terms of the CCMA Chairperson, I'm not too sure how COSATU calculated the 600 million, but from the numbers that are in the budget and in the estimate of national expenditure, CCMA from basically over the MTF, the reductions are 300 million, and basically 90 million for this year, 115 million for next year, and 95 million for the year after. But overall, they are receiving 3 billion over the MTF. So for the first year is 992, the following year is 1 billion, and the other year is 0.1 billion. So basically, Chairperson, with these reductions, we think that of course, they're going to feel the pain as everyone else, but the entity will need to adapt its service delivery model in line with what is available for their resources. I don't think the aim was to shut down CCMA or cause disruptions in CCMA. Basically, what we try to do is everyone has to feel the pain of fiscal consolidation, but how do we minimize the impact, and how do the organizations themselves look at the way in which they deliver services and make sure that they improve the services. The big issue, Chairperson, that has been raised is the social relief distress grant, the 350, and there's been a lot of talk about Treasury refusing to extend this. It's not a Treasury decision. The matter is in Cabinet, and I think, Chairperson, you explained it very well. When we presented the budget, the extension was only up to April. Now the extension was after the request for extension was after the tabling of the budget. If we go and extend this, it means we have to do a new budget, because if we change the fiscal framework, which is not allowed by law, it means the minister will have to table something new. But even then, Chairperson, it still requires significant reprioritization. And what I haven't picked up is where exactly is this reprioritization? As you said, it's difficult for us to say this person will be corrupt, therefore we're not going to allocate 10 billion, we're going to allocate 9. I mean, it doesn't work like that. So it would have been good to hear exactly which line items the proposed reductions will come from, so that we can look at it as the Treasury and explain whether it's feasible or what the consequences or thereafter. Another one, Chairperson, was the spending on health, where basically there was, apart from the fact that the vaccine program was not moving as fast, but the question was, is there enough funding allocated to health to deal with the potential third wave and fourth waves? And Chairperson, as we said in the budget, money has been allocated to both the national department and the provinces to deal with this. And the last one from me, Chairperson, is on agriculture, land reform and rural development, where there was a cry on why we haven't allocated funds for the Perishable Product Export Control Board. And basically, Chairperson, a simple answer there is that this entity has enough resources or reserves to deal with or to pay their expenditure, and they get this money, or they also raise enough revenue from the farmers through the fees to deal with this. So Chairperson, this is in short some of the questions and the discussions that we picked up. I'm going to ask Tshepiso to just take you through the SOCs. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Modise. Chair, may I go ahead?
Good morning, Tshepiso.
Good morning, welcome. Chair, honorable members, and everybody.
Please go.
Thank you very much. Chair, I'll deal very quickly with Denel and Land Bank, and maybe spend a bit of time on SAA, because there's a legal aspect that we need to deal with as well. One of the questions asked around funding for defense naturally was Denel. And the question that we were asked was, what is NT doing to assist Denel? Chair, this question already just presupposes the only challenge Denel has is financial, which is really far from the truth. In all honesty, there is nothing NT can do for Denel unilaterally. A broader defense ecosystem needs to be considered in order to deal with the various challenges of Denel and ultimately find a sustainable solution for Denel and for the defense altogether. So DPE with Department of Defense have been requested by Cabinet to present a very comprehensive strategy aimed at saving Denel, among other things. So in doing so, they're working very closely with ourselves, National Treasury, Denel, and also AMSCO. So that particular issue, Chair, it's still developing and will be going back to Cabinet led by Defense and DPE in order to provide this comprehensive strategy. Another question, Chair, under agriculture, which we would expect it would be the Land Bank. The question that was being asked was whether Land Bank has concluded the negotiations with its lenders. And the short answer to that, Chair, is that Land Bank has not concluded its liability solution with the lenders. National Treasury, together with Land Bank and the advisors, are still busy with the lenders and hope to find a solution and finalize as soon as possible, because the longer it takes, the much bigger impact it has, not only on the lenders and Land Bank, but also on the farmers. Another question was posed in relation to the support to the farmers during this period. Chair, we can say that Land Bank did not stop lending to farmers during this difficult period, but obviously, given that they need to spread the resources that they have between their farmers and also the lenders, whom, as we know, currently the status is a default status, has been providing funding, however, at a very small scale, and also pace given the financial constraints and also challenges around the current default. Chair, just moving on to SAA, I am certainly not the spokesperson for the Department of Public Enterprises, but I'll try and just put some facts that could potentially help in relation to what has been submitted. On the policy and rationale for funding subsidiaries and issues around competition, I think the Department of Public Enterprises, Transport, and potentially the competition authorities will be better placed to deal with that. However, on the actual business rescue, I would like to submit as follows, Chair, that the creditor-approved business rescue plan assumed that no funding would be provided for, or at least they did not assume the actual number of capitalization of subsidiaries. However, they did allude to the fact that subsidiaries would require financial support for the viability of the SAA group. So if we look at, if I refer Alta and members to page 56, 57 to 61 of the business rescue plan, it states that company rescue business plan had various consequences on the subsidiaries, and various intergroup transactions were required both for the successful business rescue of SAA in order to sustain the financial viability of the subsidiaries. Secondly, the subsidiaries have been engaging with government in relation to their funding, recapitalization and restart. So while there was not a specific number, the BRP did recognize that there would be a required support for the subsidiaries. Therefore, DPE, as a shareholder, in reading the BRP plan and also understanding the financial status of the subsidiaries, envisaged that the subsidiaries would need to be funded. And they further went ahead in their proactiveness and included the number of 2.7 billion funding in the overall BRP funding request that was submitted to Cabinet and approved by Cabinet. So in short, Chair, there is no money that is taken from the BRP funding plan that they requested government to commit themselves to. And as such, there is no contravention of the Companies Act in relation to government not respecting the BRP plan. And all monies as envisaged and also requested by the business rescue practitioners has been committed to by government and also provided to the entity. Otherwise, Chair, I don't think, one, the business rescue practitioners would have exited. Two, they would have certainly make it formally known that government has reneged on its obligation. So, Chair, an assumption was obviously made by DPE that 2.7 billion, which is included in the 10.5 billion for overall BRP funding, can be transferred to the subsidiaries because they read the plan and the support of subsidiaries in the same vein as part of assisting the SAA group, in particular SAA. And the question then remains, should they have put everything together and lumping the funding together? I think that is the question that we are trying to solve for by including this bill. So after having consulted with NT, that it cannot be, those are still separate entities which MP will deal with the legalities of it. Then DPE requested NT subsequently to assist in finding an appropriate mechanism for the funds to be allocated to subsidiaries as initially envisaged. And that's where a special appropriation was deemed to be the right mechanism. And that is why we are here today. So Chair, if you could allow me, I will then ask MP to just come in and then take us through the process. But I thought it was important to highlight that no cent as envisaged by the BRP practitioners has been taken in favor of the subsidiaries. It was envisaged already that the subsidiaries were going to require support. MP, I will hand over to you through the chairperson, and you can take the committee through the legal process that was then recommended to deal with this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tshepiso. MP, please come in.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson, other committee members. I think Tshepiso dealt with the first part of what I wanted to say, But just to briefly capture that, the way it was classified in the second Adjustments Appropriation Bill meant that the money could only be used for the implementation of the business rescue plan for SAA. And as Advocate Vic also explained, the subsidiaries are separate entities and they were not part of the business rescue for SAA. Therefore, it was not possible to use the 2.7 billion that was intended from the beginning for the subsidiaries for SAA. Yes, for those subsidiaries. Just briefly on the Companies Act and the Business Rescue Plan. Firstly, obviously, we acknowledge that it binds SAA and it also binds government as the sole shareholder of the SAA. But it does not bind Parliament when it deals with appropriation legislation. It doesn't bind it in respect of the Business Rescue Plan. And then I think the important thing, and it's also alluded to in the outer submission, is the letter of support that was provided by government for purpose of the business rescue of SAA clearly indicates that the funding will be provided, but it doesn't limit it to appropriations from the fiscus. And there's also other sources of funding. And for that purpose, there's a strategic equity partner process that's currently underway and managed by DPE. And you will see even the 7.8 billion is not, that is not the total amount that's required by the plan. There's more funding. The total amount is 14 billion. So therefore, what we advise then is that what we require is to adjust the Second Adjustments Appropriation Act through this appropriation bill. And this is coming to the next question as to compliance with the PFMA when you adjust an appropriation act. In Section 32, it specifically provides you of shifting of funds within a vote. So there is provision for that, and that's done on a regular basis every year through an adjustments budget where funding are moved within a vote and sometimes even between votes. So that is the proposal contained in this bill in respect of SAA. So it does comply with the PFMA. And then the second part or issue I just want to indicate is that the funding, the purpose of the use of these funds for the 3 subsidiaries identified, it doesn't say it's only for debt payment. It could also be paid for salaries, etc. And then the urgency requirement that's in the clause of the bill in Section 3.2, that only relates to where the minister, on request, is advised that a particular subsidiary has a greater need or more urgent need for funding, then the minister can take some of the funding, say for instance from SA Technical, and give it to Mango. And this provision is also not unique. There's a similar provision in Section 5 of all the Appropriation Acts and also in the current appropriation bill that's before Parliament in Clause 5, and that deals with that. That in short, that's my legal view. In our view, it complies with, there's no contradiction with the Companies Act or the Constitution or the PFMA, and it's within Parliament's power to pass this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, MP. Dr. Mampo, I take it that National Treasury's response is done here. Am I right?
Yes, Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you so much. Just one thing, please, can we have a written response, just as you have captured your responses? If we could have that by Monday, please.
Certainly, Chairperson, we will share it with Cindy immediately after this meeting. Okay,
good. Thank you. I've got Advocate Jenkins on the platform. Advocate Jenkins, just for the benefit of Advocate Fick and Dr. Vermoten, it comes from the legal department in Parliament. Advocate Frank Jenkins.
Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, Chair, to all the honorable members and members of the public. Good afternoon. Chair, I listened to the submissions, and as you know, my principal task here is to look at Parliament acting within the Constitution when we pass legislation. And the question that I just wanted to comment on is whether in passing this legislation, we, as part of government, according to the Constitution, are actually acting contrary to Section 152 sub 4 of the Companies Act, which says that that business rescue plan is binding on all the shareholders and creditors. And it actually says those who hold securities. So, Chair, Parliament is certainly not bound by that provision because we do not hold securities and we're not a creditor of South African Airways. So actually, Chair, the reason to challenge legislation is set out in the Constitution. It's either a procedural matter or, if one finds, then a substantive matter within that legislation. And in this regard, Chair, I think that the business rescue plan, as explained by my colleague, Advocate MP van Schoor, is something separate to passing this appropriation bill, Chairperson. Certainly there's a connection. Certainly the money that's coming from here can be used for that. But if the business rescue plan remains intact and government complies with that, then certainly one must say, then why was there a concern around this appropriation bill or special appropriation bill? Because the link is not as clear as it sometimes appear from certain perspectives, Chair. And Parliament is empowered by the Constitution to pass any legislation within the boundaries of the Constitution. That's Section 44 of the Constitution, Chair. So we can pass this law, in my view, if the business rescue plan, and I'm just saying if the business rescue plan is negatively affected by this appropriation that we're passing in the National Assembly and then the NCOP later, then that might be a matter to see, was there then some kind of intention? Is the rationality of this legislation under question? Is the reasonableness of this legislation under question? But as it is at this point in time, Chair, I cannot see why Parliament can be seen to be undercutting or impacting negatively on the obligations of the specific shareholders in government in terms of Section 152(4) of the Companies Act, Chair. So I just wanted to leave it there and just give that comment to the members because let me put it this, Chair, and I'll end with that. Parliament's constitutional legislative powers cannot be overridden by a business rescue plan, Chair. That's as simple as it is. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Advocate Jenkins. Yeah, let me. I just wanted you to come in and also share your opinion. I know law is unlike natural sciences. In natural sciences, water is 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and that's it. Then we have got water. In law, you read one sentence and you come with 101 interpretations. I'm just saying there's always a room to argue one or the other. So, but I just wanted to also just assure the participants that these things have been considered. It's not that Parliament just went into this process without considering some of the legalities, which rightly were also raised by Outer. But thank you very much, and Advocate Jenkins, you know, you'll also give us a written submission from your part. Yeah, but can I take this opportunity to thank all the presenters of today. That was quite an informative presentations, and a lot of perspectives were put into the appropriations bill and the adjustment appropriation bill 2021. Let's go to the next agenda item. Darren, do you have any announcements? Darren, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Chair. No, there's nothing from me. We are meeting on Tuesday to consider the two reports on both bills, the appropriation bill and the special appropriation bill. That's it, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you so much. I know you have got a challenge with the support staff and so on, but can you, as soon as you have finished with your first draft report, share with us, the honorable members, right? So that when we meet on Tuesday, we don't spend much time on the things that we could have corrected before the meeting. Agreed?
Agreed, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The meeting stands adjourned, and thanks to everybody who was on the platform.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Shanyan.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you.
Bye. Enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, and msebenze kahle, Comrade Tipuo.
Thank
I
you,
know
Chair.
you've got other responsibility you are busy with.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Thank you.